Time theft today. What job are you not doing today, everybody?
What are you thefting?
What are you thefting? Who are you stealing money from? Job, government, nonprofit, other
Yourself?
entity, your, yourself. Yeah, we all play ourselves sometimes
Mm-hmm.
on this channel. That's for sure. Hey Quarian, hey Slippery Loops, hey Pool Boyish Girl. That's a very good name.
Ooh, that's really good.
Trinity
That's
Box, hello.
even company software engineering monies. Shall we come
Oh
up?
my god.
Very
Oh, so
good.
you're the financially load-bearing person in the polycule, huh, Chubby?
Oh, it's real.
Everybody's got one. Juju NB, I'm applying for jobs while listening.
Hell yeah.
Excellent. Quarian, double time thefting today, sewing while I watch the stream. Oh yeah, you're on that overemployed double clocking.
Anybody playing Balatro while they watch? I know that's been the
What's
big
that?
the big second screen. It's a game, it's a Steam game that is like it's like a poker roguelike. It's very fun.
Oh, that sounds good. I do like poker.
It's like it basically mostly just uses the scoring from poker and you can like discard, which helps so you can like kind of build stuff, and then there's like all these weird multipliers. It's very good.
That sounds good. That sounds very like stimulating.
It is. The
Good
the
way.
numbies go up stuff is really good.
Shit.
It's a great second
Uh
screen activity.
oh, y'all with your multiple screens. with your wealth of things to look at. I gotta get a setup. J Baz, hey, I'm available time right now. Hey, hi Jen. Speaking of multiple screens, she's got a really good setup that uh, I'm very envious of. Hey
uh,
Cassie.
Neon Meow 69. Hi, I'm unemployed. That just puts you in permanent time theft
Fuck
state,
yes.
which is the best.
Most advanced.
I definitely don't want anybody people here to be like, what is the job, like a job. We're not encouraging jobs. So that is the highest state of time theft that you can have, and it's the most admirable.
Yes, absolutely. Unemployment. I admire the unemployed so much. I've been trying to join y'all for a long time and they just won't do it to me.
Yeah, I'm unemployed. This stream is the only fucking thing I do. So, yeah, don't be ashamed of that.
Fuck yeah.
So
Unemployment rocks.
so today we have a juicy fucking sharticle for everybody. Oh no,
Oh
my
yeah.
button doesn't work.
Oh no.
Why
After
doesn't
you
my
like
button?
reset up the iPad and everything.
Oh, that's weird.
That's surprising.
My yeah, I can change scenes. Oh well, we have to do it manually. There we go. There's
There we
that
go.
good.
Sharticle City, baby.
And it was also a piss course for sure. It I feel like most sharticles we do on here are piss courses. Not all of them. Sometimes we find some little known sharticle, but this one was definitely a piss course.
Yeah. This was a big turd and a fair amount of piss.
A big turd floating around in the
In a
X the
bowl.
Everything app toilet.
Oh my god, yeah. Love to see it. So many of you all have probably already seen this article. It's the NPR article about long COVID and COVID exposure, and a woman basically complaining that her husband's fear of COVID exposure, that her disabled husband's fear of COVID exposure is really getting in the way of her restaurant time,
Yeah. Uh
basically.
yeah, it sucks. Um, it is literally. I mean, that's it. That's the whole thing. It is. Uh, it is on NPR. And it, yeah, basically they both got COVID, and her husband got COVID extremely badly. And he has had. Does it actually say? I guess he doesn't actually have. It doesn't. It doesn't say that he has long COVID, but um, he has an autoimmune disease that
Mhm.
it could complicate, is what it says. Um, and it's wild, this paragraph that is just like, there are more reasons to be anxious. State and national measures to prevent COVID are following. Well, like most recently, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's decision to end its 5-day isolation guideline. And the
Mhm.
disease is still very much a threat. Yes, vaccines and boosters can protect against severe illness, but vulnerable people like my husband are still at high risk. To top it off, there is a lot we don't know about the coronavirus. Emerging evidence suggests the neurological symptoms of COVID can persist years after infection. And that's the entirety of, yeah, COVID's still really bad, y'all. The fact that if it, like, it's almost like if they didn't have that, maybe like you could be like, well, maybe they just don't understand how bad it is. But it's like, no, you
Right.
get it. Like, clearly she gets it, because clearly her husband fucking gets it. Um,
Mhm.
and the rest of it is just, I am sad that I want to be going to restaurants more, and my
Mhm.
therapist says that it's that me and my husband have to compromise.
Oh my god. And I think that is a whole conversation worth getting into, the amount of the way that therapists have just been, in many cases, telling people that they're irrationally afraid of COVID, or that they have that working on their fear of COVID is an important therapeutic goal and things like that, when that's
Right.
not what somebody's going to, like, seek help for. Like, it's one thing if you are trying to make a bunch of different decisions and, like, you want a therapist to help you think through different what you're comfortable with, what's responsible, what's not. But for them to just tell you out like, "Oh, your husband's irrational, you need to
Yeah.
compromise," imposing that on people is just so ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, there's a lot to get into, so I don't, but it's very much like, yeah, in these situations Jackson said, who is Jackson? Oh, just to
I think
introduce
that's an
this
expert that
fucker.
she
Yeah, I just wanted to actually, James C. Jackson. Um and I do wonder if this is, cuz I mean, apparently he wrote Clearing the Fog from Surviving to Thriving with Long COVID, a Practical Guide, which seems like he would know. So I didn't look into this guy at all, but I do wonder if this is like how this therapist's advice is being um relayed here is really biased in that way. Um but from what the article presents, it's like, um in these situations, Jackson says compromise is key. The best outcomes in relationships are when partners with polar extremes of safety move towards the other in a way that is a little bit uncomfortable for them. Um, uh, for me, that might mean being okay with dining al fresco most of the time. For him, that might mean acquiescing to eating indoors sometimes, maybe during less busy times during the day, which is just so wild, because it's like, this is not a person. This is not. This is an immunocompromised person, and we'll get into this later. Of like, there's these stupid arguments about like, well, how many people actually is that, right? Which
Mhm.
is what we're gonna get into later. But that's fucking irrelevant. Like, what this guy is. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I guess you could doubt what he believed, like that his doctors are right, or that his doctors didn't say this, that he's actually
Mhm.
immunocompromised or something. But like, it's so easy to get COVID, if you're fucking
Yeah.
immunocompromised. Presumably, he can't get any of the vaccines. Um, that's not. I don't think that's necessarily true for everyone who's immunocompromised, but I do know that that is a people that are immunocompromised at times cannot get the vaccine, any of the
Mhm.
vaccines, and it's just this false dichotomy is absolutely wild and pretty much the basis of this article.
Yeah. She does mention, I think it's unclear, but she talks about, I think her husband is vaccinated, but mentions that vulnerable people are still at a high risk of
Okay.
complications and illness. And, like, I think that one of the things that's really difficult in talking about this stuff is when it comes to assessing somebody's risk profile, we don't know. Like, we
Right.
know that certain groups are at higher risk and that there's a bunch of different variables that are factors in there. But the truth is, we don't have good data anymore, especially now that the CDC and most world governments are not collecting quality data on COVID cases. Tests aren't regularly available in a lot of places, and they're not free here anymore. Like, so we don't know how many people actually have COVID at any point in time. So it's this moving target based on wastewater data at best. And we also just don't have good enough data to know who's at risk, who isn't, under what circumstances are they and aren't they. And so that means anybody who is at high risk has to operate out of an abundance of caution all of the time,
Yeah.
because this thing can hit anybody. And frankly, we really can't predict who's gonna get long COVID and not. Plenty of non-immunocompromised people get long COVID.
Mm.
Um, and a lot of times you're at risk in ways that you don't know, because most of us don't have, like, a complete, like, genetic testing profile in front of us,
Yeah.
like, there's just so many elements of just randomness, or lack of knowledge to the degree that it functions as randomness or, like, error variance, that, like,
Hmm.
like, there is no way to say, like, "Oh, there's no objective measure of what a tolerable risk is, and so if somebody is in a particularly vulnerable spot,
Yeah.
they don't even have information to operate on,
Right.
you know? And so
Yeah.
calling it irrational for them to have an abundance of caution is just, like, ridiculous.
Yeah. And this article never calls him irrational, full stop. But it is
Right.
the basis. It is written in the basis of which, like I said, it says like it has this paragraph that's like, yeah, people have reasons to be anxious. It's fucked up. And then the entire article is predicated on this idea that both um both partners like emotions around this stuff are like equal. And
Mhm.
there's so much validating of the the authors um like sadness around not not being back in 2019, which we don't like. The point is not that that's not valid. Like,
Mhm.
absolutely that stuff sucks. It really fucking sucks. And but it is to put it on the same level of validity as someone who could fucking die if they get COVID
Mhm.
or be immensely disabled is, yeah, that is what this entire article is predicated on. You know,
Right.
I'm sad that I don't get to go eat out at restaurants, and my husband is anxious that he's gonna die.
Right. Yeah, like, and the framing is not, it's not a mutual conversation between the 2 of them, which could have been an interesting piece.
Yeah,
And could have even been a useful piece. Um, Writers don't pick their headlines, so I can't put her on the line for this, and it's, as a writer, very frustrating when editors give you dog shit headlines, but the framing is wrestling with the husband's fear. It's not wrestling with COVID for 2 people who are in 2 different positions with
right.
regard to it, right? Like,
Yeah, this is not wrestling with my husband's fear of getting COVID again is not an unfair title for this. It's uh piece. Like
mhm, that's
it
the
is,
framing. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, and as Gavin says in the chat, it seems like, the husband is more open to compromise and conversation in a lot of ways than she is, which
Absolutely.
is really unbalanced, and it's and it I think a lot of the things we're gonna talk about today will keep falling back on because of all of these system failures and failures on purpose, negligence from these systems, everything is falling on disabled people to
Yeah.
do all of the public communication on this topic, to do all of the mediation, to do all of the monitoring statistics, all of these things that like should not have to be their jobs or that sometimes they don't have the tools or the resources to even be able to do.
Yeah.
So, like, yes, should there be a conversation when two people in a relationship have different risk profiles and uh, competing access needs, for example, or, having conversations about here are the things that I'm finding hard that I know are important to do to protect you. And I want to make sure that I don't slip up and do something stupid that's going to put you at risk. How do we make this sustainable? How do we, find some kind of outlet,
Yeah.
ways of socializing that are safe, whatever. You can have those conversations, but that framing, it does have to be collaborative
Hmm.
rather than your fear is a problem, your vulnerability is a problem, your disability is a problem.
Yeah. Um, I'm trying to remember because it's just mind boggling. I think I one of the tweets that I saw that was reacting to this, I think from somebody that was disabled, was like, I literally started screaming when I read this. Um,
Mhm.
and like the nitpicks that she has about um yeah, the reality is if he gets COVID again, he could get really sick. So some of our efforts to protect our households from the coronavirus are warranted. Some? What? That is just wild that she's like she never explicitly like she basically is like he's being overly anxious, but then
Mhm.
never actually describes like what. So the thing is, like, for example, he wears a mask outdoors when no one is around. When I bring it up, he gets defensive. Why do you fucking care? like
Right.
the thing she's struggling with is not being able to do the things that she wants to do, right? And then
Mhm.
she's like, so not all of these things that he wants for our family are reasonable. And then the examples she gives are things that he is fucking doing. Like
Mhm.
a lot of people's responses to that is it's like, for especially if for somebody who's really immunocompromised, yes, being outdoors with a mask on might be unnecessary, but not if somebody comes right up to you and starts breathing in your space. Not if
Mhm.
someone was just in the exact place that you were breathing a bunch. You can't, these are a bunch of variables that you can't know. And
Right.
how hard is it for him to wear a mask outdoors? It I like I think about uh when I wear a like I'll put my mask on in the car and then walk into the store.
Mhm.
Like that's a really
Right.
common thing that I do. And I just know every single fucking person that is looking at me in that situation is like, well, you got your fucking mask on outside. What are you, crazy? And it's like, no, I just put it on. It's not it's not
Yeah.
hard. And why do you care?
It's like half the time that's just so you like remember. Like
Right.
and this comes up in the Freddie DeBoer article. He talks about people wearing masks in their cars
Right.
seeming irrational. And it's like, I don't know, it's really easy to forget to put that shit on leaving the house. Like if you don't
Yeah.
just make it a regular step, which again, that's harm reduction, right? You make something just a routinized step so that you always do it. So you always have that motherfucking thing on you.
Yeah.
Um And, like, yeah, what is the barrier? What's the cost to you for your husband wearing a mask other than it means that you can't pretend that everything's
Yes.
fine? It makes it
Yes.
clear that he's probably uncomfortable with the risks that maybe you're dragging him to, and, you know, you want to just pretend that there is no risk there.
Yeah. I very much think about I think that this tweet from some somebody I saw, Liz at Real Gay Arby's. Liberals will not be satisfied until we take our masks off because they need to feel like good people. Any amount of precautions we take makes them feel uncomfortable because it threatens their
Hmm.
self conception. So they're demonizing us and coercing us to unmask however they can.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. It's that same like weird projection of like people feeling judged by just like the existence of a vegan person in the same room as them, like somebody
yeah,
who's like, and we can get into like whatever, like this has nothing to do with whether or not like veganism is like the most ecologically sound thing, whatever. Somebody makes that choice, people feel judged just by the existence of someone making a very measured choice that's kind
yep,
of difficult and costly,
yep,
that they think is right. It's like, um, yeah, the like liberal obsession with feeling good and being seen as good
yeah,
without any concern for whether what you're actually doing is good.
yep.
Um, so many good things have been happening in the chat.
I know.
Um,
It's going too fast. I can't read it.
yes, but but there's a lots of really good lots of good contributions I want to touch on. Gavin mentioned there was a thread going around this week about a woman who was put in the psych ward by because she was trying to make hospital staff that were treating her wear masks.
Holy shit.
I
That
saw that as well.
tracks. I did not see that, but it tracks so well. I
Yeah.
I will say I mean I had a friend who was in inpatient and got COVID when they were in inpatient. And and this was a I think this was a while ago before um maybe it was right when the masking mandate stopped for our hospital, which made me it makes me so mad. Like I think that you know, I don't know. There's we can get into specifics about what should be happening, but one that like hospital staff not having a mask requirement is so wild to me, specifically, and I mean I have pretty chronic depression, and I have not been in a position necessarily that like necessitated me to like strongly consider inpatient psych, but it is extremely frustrating to me at my worst moments that like that's not a thing I can that I feel like I can consider because
Hmm.
I am disabled in a way that is like causing me a lot of fatigue, whether that is long COVID or not. And it's like I can't get that risk of I just like feel like if I go into inpatient, I will get COVID. There's no way around it.
Hmm.
Like it is an enclosed place. Nobody wears masks. It there's just no way around it. And so that's sort of an aside, but that is I can at my point is I'm going on a tangent. My point is that I can absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Casual Live said in the chat. Oh yeah, sorry.
No, that is the
Got
person I
COVID in
was
the psych
talking
ward.
about. Yeah, literally
Yeah.
that is the person I was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's awful, and it has so many other downstream healthcare effects.
Yeah.
Because if people can't seek out preventative care, this is the same thing we've seen affect fat patients since forever. If you can't access compassionate, safe preventative care, you go to the doctor less often, you access medical services less often, and problems stack and progress and get worse over time. And
Yeah.
so then that is more of a whatever strain on the healthcare system. It costs more resources that hospitals can't keep up with. And people also just die or get sick in other ways that they wouldn't necessarily have had to if they've been able to seek out preventative care. Um, and that's without even just going into how little we really know about long COVID, who has it, what counts as it. There's so many people in situations like yours where there's all of these different health system breakdowns they've been experiencing in the last few years. And who knows, like it can't be proven
Yeah.
easily that it's long COVID. And
And
so then we don't have records on it
let
and how
alone
prevalent it is.
yes, and but let alone it can't be proven. Like I think that there's a lot of like actual medical like it is not an easy thing to um like diagnose in a physical way, but
Mhm.
also no one is trying. Like
Right, right,
no one cares. Like no one wants to
mhm,
make those diagnoses.
right.
uh
Right, it's a very political exclusion as well as the, like, methodological factors of it. Just COVID touches so many different aspects of the body, and we had so many poorly working theoretical models for what it was going into it. That's why it took so long for scientists to publicly admit that it was airborne,
right,
for example.
right.
They were thinking of it only as respiratory, as fomite-based, and not affecting the entire, like, vascular system and all this other stuff. So there's that, but then there's also the very willful political ignorance of it and no money being put into studying it,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
or to
It is.
categorizing people living with it as disabled for benefits and stuff.
Yeah, it is extremely upsetting the um the way the uh CDC feels like completely. I mean, from the beginning, the warnings have been so tempered by by politics, and
Mhm.
I I think that was a really radicalizing thing for me when Biden got elected, because I was not surprised to see that under Trump, but then to see Biden come in and then nothing changed, you know?
Yeah.
Like literally nothing. Like I thought I didn't I mean I didn't expect us to go back down into lockdowns or something, but I expected, I don't know, some change of course, but it was just like, oh well, that's done now. Like from the moment he
Mhm.
was in office, it was that's done now, and it's been a slow erosion of even the small policies that were in place.
But science is back, baby.
Yeah.
That shit. I
Yeah.
I I think yeah, I mean, COVID was a radical 2020 was a radicalizing moment for a lot of us in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, and I think for me, seeing how the city of Chicago under Democratic leadership, under Lori
Yes.
Lightfoot, handled it, like, pushed me, beyond the edge, and it is part of why I always talk so much about systems failure and not blaming individuals, and I
Yes.
know people sometimes get the wrong idea from that, that I'm just saying, "People should do whatever, man," that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm saying in this city, Lori Lightfoot opened up restaurants in the summer of 2020, and then when cases spiked a month later, exactly right on time,
Right.
as you would expect, she blamed kids on the black kids on the South Side having house parties. And she said, if you act like a criminal, we're going to lock you up and treat you like a criminal. So when kids on the South Side were having house parties, let's say not an ideal COVID behavior, her response was to say she was going to put them in jail, which was one of the number one sources of COVID spread and death by COVID. Like worldwide, the US prison system is one of those things.
Yeah.
um, she opened restaurants and she had the beaches closed for the whole summer. People were just jumping off of rocks into the lake because of course people were trying to like socialize outside, one of the few safe, relatively accessible things to do that summer,
Yeah.
and you could get ticketed or arrested for using public spaces. She forced kids back into schools. She was constantly using this rhetoric of you need to do the right things, you need to be a responsible person. The reason numbers are
Right.
going up is because at like interview after interview, and I've cited this stuff a lot um, in my writing about this stuff, like saying that cases were rising because of personal at home gatherings between people. When she and her wife were fucking going to restaurants constantly.
Right.
It's it's really maddening, and that's what democratic leadership also does on these things because they're in the pocket of business interests, and that's why the Biden administration used the exact same kind of rhetoric. They lied to us and said that if you get vaccinated, you can do whatever you want, and that is a really hard lie to walk back, and they weren't interested in walking it back,
Yeah.
and
It was the stuff around masking was really so frustrating to me because it's so easy, and God, I'm trying to remember what that early Biden thing was. Like there was a lot of discord because masking became this political like polarization point, which was absolutely the fact that it was a conservative liberal polarization point was absolutely mind-boggling and upsetting. And just I how do you make something like this a polarization point? Like,
Mhm.
but then when Biden got in, he was like, well, conservatives think masking is scary, so we're just gonna fucking like give up on masking, you know,
Mhm.
and and that has been, that is the Democratic. I mean, look at the fucking the border stuff that's happening right now. It is the specifically Biden administration, but the Democratic status quo in general is like, well, how can we, you know, how could we compromise? It's the same thing that's happening in this article, right? Where it's
Mhm.
this false equivalency, um, and how can we compromise on the extremes when it's a false equivalency? This is the same thing, Nazis want to uh, want to kill minorities. It's, I've seen five different versions of this comic where it's like
Mhm.
Nazis want to kill minorities, and the left wants, like, you know free healthcare or whatever, like wants that not to
Yeah.
happen. And it's like, wow, both of you are really really extreme right now.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so revealing. Both this and Palestine have just really been so revealing for me of how much liberal people, even people that I kind of just liked in my life, don't actually give a fuck
Right.
about other people. Um, like another big thing in Chicago during that time was people were putting big cardboard cutouts of Lori Lightfoot in their yards or in their windows. This idea of like Lori's watching you, she's gonna see you if you go outside and you're gonna get in trouble.
Oh
This
god, I
very
didn't
like,
hear about that. That's
yeah,
really
where's
weird.
Lori? Yeah, you would see it all around town. People would put these big cutout, angry Lori Lightfoots, Short King everywhere. The worst Short King ever.
Short
Um,
despot.
Short despot, looking just just jump scaring you everywhere you went.
Fit
And like this,
atrocious.
the fit atrocious. Yeah, the pants that have never been hemmed. I understand you're 5'1", but I think you probably are getting enough money from the city of Chicago to hem. I think. Whatever. Um, and to not drink Modelo, but whatever. If that's what you like, that's what you like. Um, but people were really into that, and they were really into masking shows that I care about other people. It shows that I'm a responsible person. Is this political symbol of affiliation, like a fucking pink pussy hat or whatever, a safety pin after Trump was elected. Liberal people were using masking as a political signifier, just like a "In this house we believe" yard sign
Yeah.
right next to fucking their Lori Lightfoot cutout. And then the moment they were told by Biden, guess what? If you get vaccinated, you can throw away your mask. Hurrah, you're free. You did it. You get to give yourself a pat on the back. It didn't it didn't matter to them at that point that the data changed. And again, people have been really heavily propagandized. People have been given really confusing information, and it is reasonable that nobody trusts what any public institution has to say on this stuff because the way the public messaging has been handled has been terrible from the start.
Yeah.
Um,
It has been purposefully, like, it feels like at every juncture the CDC has been like, well, we have to temper what what we're saying because people are so polarized about it, and we have to consider business interests. Like, I mean, this is like literally, I think it was when it went from 10 days to 5 days,
mhm.
the requirement, which is now no days. It is it the most
Come to
recent.
work with COVID.
Yeah, the most recent change, I think some people were misunderstood what that change was. Now it is the same as every other illness. Um, so there is not a specific COVID guideline. Um, and because their like guidelines in general is you should not go to work when sick. But still, it is they have ended any kind of guideline for, for COVID. But I specifically
Mhm.
remember when it went from I mean 10 days was not enough. I mean
Right.
my understanding was it was 14 days was the reasonable um, scientific position.
Yeah,
And
up to
then
21 sometimes even.
right. And it was 10 days and it went when it went to 5 days, people in the CDC were saying, "Yes, this is not what the science is saying, but we have to make concessions to business. We can't let the economy fail." And
Mhm.
and look at, Biden's entire fucking anyway, I interrupted you to make that point. But
No, no, it's a good point, and I think it's important to talk about again the, like, that liberal doublespeak of here's what the
right,
responsible thing is to do versus are you gonna actually build any systems that are gonna make it possible for people to do the right thing?
right.
Because the CDC can say, "Oh, we advise that if you're sick, you shouldn't go to work." Everybody who's ever worked in, like, food service, retail, any kind of mandatory in-person office job even, you don't have any protections if you're sick.
Yeah,
Like, you're gonna be dragged into work when you're sick. You're gonna be on the line fucking cooking while you're, like, sneezing on shit against your will. There's nothing you can do.
yeah,
You're gonna risk being fired. So unless there's legal protections in place saying, you know, if you're sick, period, you should have guaranteed time off, guaranteed paid time off that's protected. People aren't gonna be able to do the right thing.
right.
Um, and surprise, surprise, the big populations that we see at risk of getting COVID today are people who have to work, who are working class people, many of them who are themselves at risk, who have no choice but to come in physically to the workplace
Yeah.
and be subjected to this stuff. Oh,
Yeah, and one
mhm,
thing you were saying was about the confusing messaging, um, and to round out my point that I was saying about like when they went from 10 to 5 days, I'm admitting like this is why people don't trust them. Like this
mhm,
is this like watering down of the science so that it becomes more palatable. Well, people don't believe you when I mean the biggest thing that I've seen from conservatives, like even the crazy COVID conspiracy conservatives is like, well, you said one thing and then you said a different thing.
mhm,
So I've seen so many of those conservatives point out all of the hypocrisy in the messaging and it's like, yeah, you're right. The messaging has been fucking horrible. You're right.
mhm,
They said one thing and then they said another because they were trying to water down the messaging. And
mhm.
all you've done is muddy the messaging when it should have been consistent from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is very hard for the average person to locate trustworthy information and especially to be willing to sustain the cost, the social cost, the risk of getting fired, all of these things in order to make the time cost of like parsing all this information in order to do the right thing.
Right.
While at the same time, it's fucking disgusting that we like exist in a culture where the ideology is very much about personal enjoyment and like just even the idea that like the thing that you're missing due to lockdown is going out to restaurants just reflects how hollow and isolated American culture is anyway, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Like the things people are so desperate to do or desperate to get back to are such empty, unfulfilling things.
Yeah. But it's
But
all we
that's
have. That's
what
what
we see
we have.
freedom as. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we that's how we experience seeing other people having something to do, having something to look forward to. It's all about some expensive thing we're gonna consume,
Right.
in like a public for-profit venue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you guys hear her purring?
Oh, now I can. Oh, little wet nose. Mm.
Oh my god.
Oh my
Okay.
god, that sounds good. Oh, ASMR.
Ugh.
Yes.
This is Charles for anyone who doesn't know, by the way.
Yes. Charles in the chat, those of you who have that emoji, let me just do one real quick.
As
And if you don't have Charmungus, you should subscribe to Maddie's
my
channel.
my currently dead channel someday. Anyway, um
Uh,
yeah, I feel like we've gotten off topic into a bunch of things because we have a lot, there's just so much to talk about here. So,
mhm.
um but let's is there more I feel like I don't know if we um adequately discussed all of the parts of this article because there's a couple more things that I wanted to point out that were absolutely wild. Like one of the things that you said is that he has clearly compromised for her so
Mhm.
much, um,
Yeah.
including and yeah, the this at the end. So they went on a trip to Dubai, which I mean, being in a flight, a 13-hour flight for like I don't know the data, but I have to imagine that some of the higher risk stuff you can do is to be in a plane. Um
The
and
ventilation's actually pretty good on a plane, allegedly, but I find it so that's what all the data says, but it's still really hard for me to wrap my brain around. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't
that
feel true, but supposedly it is,
that does make
but an
sense.
airport is bad anyway.
Yeah, an airport is going to be bad. The ventilation is, and that is a huge component that really makes me mad. Is that how
Mhm.
little the ventilation stuff gets talked about? Because again, it is that systematic thing where we should be like, if we had fucking changed the like the requirements for HVAC and made everything, uh changed all of the fucking HVAC requirements, then we probably wouldn't be having to worry about fucking masking like
Mhm.
as much, obviously. Um
Yeah.
so in January we flew halfway across the world to visit family in Dubai. At first I thought that the stringent COVID precautions he was taking to protect himself on the airplane were over the top. In addition to wearing an N95 mask for 13 straight hours, he kept a personal air purifier at his seat at all times. But now I can see those actions for what they are. He was doing everything he could to make the trip work. In his way, he wanted me to be happy. The grudging respect of that is so, like, to understand how much of a how much of a risk that is for where this person's um like risk assessment is at, to for that acknowledgement to be so grudging is so disgusting.
It's it's crazy because he had to put so much work into making this even slightly work for him.
Yeah.
Like, he has to get all of these masks, like, he has to get the air purifier, like, he has to research what's risky, what's not, what can he handle, like, when you can't really trust the data out there because these industries are trying to cover up anything that makes them look bad that they can. Like, he is having to, as the disabled person here, shoulder so much of the burden of something that should be a public health measure and an industry-wide measure, and none of it costs her anything at all,
Yeah.
except
He's
it
not even
makes her feel
asking
bad.
he's not even asking her, like, if she was wearing a mask, she would fucking say it. Like,
Mhm,
she's not even doing this shit, which she should be, because if she gets sick, he's getting sick. Like, it's very
mhm.
unlikely that uh um that and yet he's not even asking her to do these things. He's just doing them. And she is, again, feeling guilty about the
Mhm.
dichotomy.
Right. Right, it's like she thinks it's, like, manipulative or something for
Yes.
him to just, like, be in his lane doing the things he can control. Like, I'd love to hear what his conversations with his therapist are like.
Yes.
Like, I'd love to hear his resentful little article about his wife, like, rolling her eyes at him just, like, trying to protect himself from her, you know,
Uh,
and everyone else.
and here's I've been saving the tidbit of the fucking century. Oh, by the way, just by the way, this article was published on his fucking birthday.
So fucking sad.
On his fucking birthday.
Oh my god. Call the divorce lawyers. That would just hurt my heart so much to find out that my partner saw me as a burden like
Yeah.
this and is
Yes.
and is talking about me like I'm some neurotic problem for all the world to see on NPR's Life Kit.
She could have interviewed him. Where's
Yeah,
his quote in the article?
yeah. Yeah, literally she quotes a relationship counselor talking about how it's important for partners to communicate,
Where's his fucking quote?
and it doesn't happen.
Happy burden day.
Yeah.
God.
So fucking sad.
Oh.
So oh. He quoted the article when it came out, so it was very much a part of his birthday. What the
Oh.
Oh,
Oh.
no. I didn't know he
Oh.
Oh.
Oh
Oh, yeah.
no! Hi, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me, Darren's version.
Oh my
No!
god, Darren,
Darren,
no.
no!
No. Oh, I'm glad
Ugh.
to see his replies are almost all people saying, "You're not the problem. We wanna hear your side of the story." Um,
Yeah,
and
she
things like that.
disabled. She got wrecked so hard.
And, you know, NPR knew what they were fucking doing running a headline like that,
Yeah,
running an
yeah,
article like this. They knew it would get a big response to present, like, one of the least charitable, more outrage-generating versions of something like this,
yeah.
and it's so irresponsible, but
You
that's
could
also
have
just what, like
ran that headline with a better article and gotten most of
Mhm,
the gotten most of the same outrage. like
mhm,
like if they had ran that fucking headline and then, had a lot better like something where it's like, it's really fucking hard for like we've said multiple times in this conversation, like you could have an article that's basically this where it's like it's really hard for me, I want to go do all these things but I can't, and I'm struggling with my inability to do this stuff, without
mhm,
framing it as his neuroses are what's causing it. um
mhm, yeah. As Jen said, clicks are money. This is what, like, funding a media empire looks like in this day and age. Uh, it like and again, this is also part of why trust in public institutions has gone completely in the toilet is because everything's paywalled or untrustworthy or both. Hey, photo.
uh
Good to see you.
Casey Goes Queerly had said something about the airplane, some study about the airplane ventilation.
Mm, yeah, if there's any updated data on that, I would be curious to see.
Slippery loops, the
The U.S.
ventilation.
Department of Defense did the study that everyone relies on. Okay, never
Oh,
mind.
I see. I see. Wait. Okay. Wow.
This is really good to know. Thank you. Just to prove it disproven in international flights to NZ, and nobody in the US talks about it.
Yeah. That really doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah, I always found that I mean, I'm no expert in ventilation science, but that
The th-
data did it's just hard to wrap one's brain around.
yeah,
So,
the thing that really blew my mind was I think it was a 99% Invisible podcast episode about how um about um radiators in apartments. If you
mhm,
live in an old apartment in America, I don't know if this is true other places, you will frequently have these like big ass radiators for heat, and they are frequently painted silver. And the silver actually fucking makes them cooler because
Mhm.
it's old technology and there's no way to adjust how much heat it puts out. It just puts out a certain amount of heat. And the reason they're so fucking hot and they've had to have been modified to make them less hot just to be bearable at all is because they were designed to fucking have all of your windows open. Literally
During
all of
Spanish flu.
during Spanish flu. Yeah. Which is like
Mhm.
even back then we were doing shit. And I mean
Yeah.
we didn't have vaccines then, and let's be clear, vaccines do help. Like, vaccines are not nothing, and but it is not you know the night and day difference that it's been sold as.
Mhm. Right, yeah. I mean, almost every old Chicago apartment, we have these huge, powerful radiators, and you really do have to keep your windows open in the winter to not overheat, and that was they understood the importance of ventilation somehow in the early 20th century,
Yeah.
and yet it won't be articulated now today because overhauling our ventilation systems would be expensive to the government and employers and schools and other public institutions, and
But they
so
do it. My understanding is they have done all that stuff in places like where the G8 meets. Like, it's
Mhm.
not like they don't know. Like,
Right, right. It's a very intentional calculation about which lives are worth that kind of infrastructural investment and which ones aren't. And that's most people's. Some conversation happening in the chat about the data about ventilation on planes and some of the limits that like even if ventilation is good, if you're right next to someone
right.
who's infectious and they're not masking, because ventilation is about how often the air is replaced and it's not good ventilation system isn't going to magically suck up the air right next to you and make it impossible to catch COVID from someone next to you.
Casey goes queerly. I have to head off, but I'll try to get a link to the Discord in the Discord later about the reason why the WHO won't say COVID is airborne. That broke my brain. Looking forward to the recording. Yeah, thank you for joining. And Cassie goes clearly. If you're still here, I'd love to see any of that stuff um,
Hmm.
in the Discord.
Yeah, and anybody who isn't already on the Piscord can join using that QR code right there. Lots of links and resources, and we have a crafting group now that photo organizes. People are doing a quilt exchange, quilt block exchange. Lots of cool shit happening
Oh,
on there.
I guess Callisto's info is still on here, which I guess it should be. Callisto's
That's
are
cool. Yeah.
they're a mod always, so.
Yeah, yeah, Callisto moderates the Discord and, the chats when it can be here, so, yeah, so that's all good. Um, oh, I don't know why that Discord command doesn't work, that should in theory. I'll look at the Nightbot later. Thank you, Slippery Loops, for trying. Um, that
um
that should be should be there.
so yeah, so that I don't know if we have any direct uh commentary on how bad is this article sucks ass. God, it's
Mhm,
so short for how bad it is.
mhm.
um
God, I
and
wonder how much she got paid to write this thing.
God. Uh Um, so there was a lot of good and also a lot of bad response to this. Um, God, fucking Sev, the guy got caught with his piss cord out when he was watching Love Live, just bleeding. No, that's not what a
Bleeding
piss
even.
cord is. Oh no.
Piss cord. Oh, well, thanks for being here, Sev. I can clearly, your sleep paralysis demon is writing in the chat right now. It's late over there in the UK.
um
You acting unwise.
uh but yeah, there was a lot of 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 good responses. One that I wanted to highlight um was there's a the gauntlet.news piece by Julia Doubleday, um, that basically, um, yeah, disabled people's exclusions from indoor spaces is a civil rights violation, not an annoyance. Which I think really, it, kind of summarizes a lot of our feelings on this too. Um,
Mhm.
and she talks a lot about um, the ways in which it actually still is very dangerous, um, particularly reinfection. And I think that
Mhm.
that is something that a lot of these discussions from sort of like what like COVID conscious critical people um, ignore is the reinfections is really the the problem at this point. Um,
Mhm.
and the reinfections and the long COVID. Um, I I'm unclear on where the deaths are at. I think it's still a lot, is my understanding. Um, but it is not like the with vaccination repeated vaccinations. Hopefully that is that is lower, but with repeated reinfections and a lot of times people are treating COVID infections as like like a safety net for people that people are getting because getting infected and then that is contributing to the herd immunity for COVID, which even if that's true, that is not like taking into account the like really serious implications of repeated infection causing um all kinds of long-term effects for people. Um,
Yeah. As Airgender said in the chat, part of the issue with deaths is that if someone gets a mysterious pulmonary embolism that's probably from long COVID, it's not counted as a COVID death.
right,
Yeah, that's a huge issue right now. A lot of the ways that COVID, because now, yeah, the COVID infection itself, now we do have medical treatments like Paxlovid and stuff like that that do really make a big difference. Um, in terms of in the immediacy of like saving someone's life. Like people are not on respirators to the degree that was an issue before.
right,
But we're not counting heart attacks as COVID deaths. We're not counting any other opportunistic infections that people get as COVID deaths. There's so many downstream effects. And this will come up when we talk about that stupid Freddie DeBoer article where he says there's no more statistical excess deaths
right,
due to COVID anymore. And it's because we're not recording any of them. We're not even conceptualizing it
right,
as possible
right.
that it being what it is.
Um, but so yeah, she goes into some of that, some of which we've talked about, and uh, but really, yeah, this both this and kind of really is describes the same thing we're kind of talking about, where it is not a um it is not an individual issue. This is a public health issue that is not being addressed. Um, and and we are putting our like COVID mitigation on the people, on the most vulnerable groups, and expecting them to do the work that we are as a society are not doing, which she calls
Mhm.
ADA violation and a civil rights violation. Um,
Mhm.
and she also points out that this article is propaganda, like we were talking about, that false dichotomy is not made in isolation. This as she says, this was not just an article that she had that the NPR happened to put out. This is a decision that was made to pathologize COVID fear, um, and it is very explicitly yeah, propaganda, knowingly or
Mhm.
not. This is the status quo that the powers that be are trying to push. Because if COVID is a problem, then we're leaving people to die, and that doesn't look good.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. There are so many institutional barriers that are going to be in place for a really long time into even admitting that more people are disabled now with long COVID, because then that opens the door for one, a lot of disability payments that the US government isn't going to want to do, but also acknowledging fault in any way and how this was handled. And so even having the administrative tools and bureaucratic tools necessary to, like, let's say, legally push for COVID protections as an ADA requirement
Right.
would be such a hard battle. And the ADA already, like, it made a massive difference in a lot of people's lives as disabled people, but it's still relatively really toothless. There's a
Yeah.
lot of ways in which it does not protect disabled people and ensure their ability to participate in public life. And
Wasn't there
yeah,
that
there's just
article we talked about that was like wasn't that about the ADA that was like for business people that was like you have to
mhm.
worry about the ADA, but actually nobody in court, nobody wins.
Yes.
Like this
Yeah.
was, I don't know if you remember where that was from, but we talked about it that on the show. I want to say early
Yeah.
on, where it was just like it was from like a business like news or like
Yeah, I can pull it up right now. It's 90% of ADA cases are lost by the person filing the lawsuit. That's
yeah,
employment discrimination cases. Employers win
yeah,
in 90% of cases, and it's been that case since the 90s, since the ADA was passed. Um, Same thing with housing discrimination too. Like, the one state where it is a little bit more easy to pursue a case is California, because you as the disabled person yourself can file proof that, oh, hey, this building isn't accessible to me, and you can get the fee monies. Like, if the company gets fined, you get the money yourself.
right,
In some cases, which is really cool. You're getting paid for enforcing the law. Like, let's make let's make the disabled people being discriminated against the cops rather than the cops.
right,
Um, but for the most part, there's almost no teeth behind most ADA requirements,
yeah,
and it's all couched in the terms of a reasonable accommodation,
right,
which, who's going to decide what's reasonable and what's not?
right.
It's always going to be powerful institutions and the government, and they're going to side with, if anything's too costly or it's unfamiliar, if there isn't a precedent for it, then it's going to be an unreasonable accommodation.
Yep, yeah. Which we'll get into with who's that fucker? Who's the bad guy that we read the
Oh,
sharticle?
Freddie DeBoer.
We fucking we're getting there. We're getting there. There's a sharticle turducken gonna happen in a minute here.
Yeah.
A response to a a bad response to a good response to this sharticle. So
Hmm.
it's a meta sharticle.
Yeah.
And he talks about that. So we'll get into that there
We'll
too.
get there. But yeah, this article goes into some of the long-term kind of disabling and lethal effects of long COVID. And there's just so many others beyond that that, like, we are seeing the ripple effects of in the data, but we don't have the smoking gun and there's no incentive. So things like childhood diabetes cases have been really strongly linked to COVID infection. And
Wow.
there's a huge increase in the number of kids with diabetes now. Um, Even very bizarre things that are, it's hard to know exactly what else going on there, but, like, so, my sister works in the medical field as an athletic trainer. The number of, like, injuries that student athletes get now is ridiculously higher, and that's, like, district wide,
Wow.
um, for her entire district. Broken bones, pulled things, concussions, like, and it's really hard to untangle there. Like, is some of it because these kids weren't in sports for a while because of lockdown? Sure, maybe, but there's, like, a physical fragility that we're seeing that is really hard to explain,
Yeah. Not
that
to
is very
mention
multifaceted.
this is a large symptom, but only one symptom of our sort of like capitalist neoliberal like breakdown of regulations and just taking care of each other in society. Another really big thing is like everyone is full of plastic. like they can't do studies on what it means to be full of plastic because they can't find anyone that isn't full of plastic. I mean, this is in our lungs, this is in our hearts, this is in placenta of newborn babies, and we just don't fucking know what any of that does. There's like cancer rates are going up, and it's like, yeah, maybe that's because we're all full of plastics that we don't know what they do. Um, and so it's like this is just another like symptom of the way that we just don't. There is no like what's the phrase where it's like you know, mandate to take care of each other, like the state's mandate
Mhm.
to take care of us, like that just doesn't exist anymore. We're all just supposed to fucking do what we're doing. But
Mhm. Yeah, the microplastic shit. I mean, I say drinking out of my stupid plastic disposable Dunkin' Donuts cup.
yeah, you gotta get you
Every
gotta
t-
get, I got it. I got a new bottle. It's all clean. I have to
Ooh,
fill it with stickers again. um
yeah, it's big.
it's bigger, yeah.
Um, yeah. I Every time I take a sip out of one of these stupid things, I'm eating the plastics, and I don't know what that's doing to my brain. But
I mean,
if
it's
I
in the
could blame
fucking
it for
drinking
certain things,
water. It's fucked.
right?
Like, it's not only that. It's like
Yeah,
it's in the tap water. It's everywhere.
right.
I get
Our
like,
fabrics, like,
yeah, our fabrics are just made out of plastic. I can't think about the plastic stuff very long because it literally starts to feel like OCD. Like I start to like think about how much plastic exists and how it's just everywhere and never going away, and I start to fucking freak out.
hmm
Ugh.
I mean, yeah, it's like cigarette smoking when that was ubiquitous,
Yeah.
but even worse and not
Gl-
understood. Like we
yeah.
need at least knew what was bad about cigarettes pretty much from the jump. It was covered up for decades by the industry, but we knew it was bad from the jump.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, laundering. This was just a new one that I just learned like this week that like laundering polyester
Yep.
is one of the leading contributors of microplastics to the water source because the heat from when you're washing your clothes makes it shed little plastic bits and then it ends up in the water,
Yep.
which is why I don't wash my clothes.
I'm a
just
stinky boy. I'm a
that's
stinky boy
why.
for the environment. I don't
That's right. Yes.
I the thing that I think about all the time, and this I don't think this exists anymore, but one time when I was a teen, my parents got like a or like I got like some kind of like uh I think it was maybe for acne. It was like a body wash that was supposed to be what is it, like physical when you physically are getting.
Exfoliant.
Yeah, it was supposed to be an
The
exfoliating.
microbeads.
Yes, and it had fucking microbeads in it. It literally had little pieces of fucking macroplastics. Like that's not microplastics anymore. That's just macroplastics. That shit is like we were
Uh,
just putting that in the water.
and it
Oh,
makes cuts in your skin. It's really bad for your skin.
is it
Everyone,
really?
please, everybody, please follow Jessica Defino, the Unpublishable on Substack. Skincare is a sham. Don't don't exfoliate. You don't need to exfoliate. The way that your skin looks nice and fresh and dewy right after you have exfoliated, it's because you've removed the protective layer of dead skin that is part of the natural process of your skin turning over. You want to keep that layer on there. All you need, if anything, is maybe a moisturizer. But first, just fucking drink more water. Maybe a moisturizer. That's all you need. Don't use that other shit.
I didn't know that. I didn't know
Thank you.
this.
Yeah.
What is that? We
Oh my
should put it in the chat.
the Unpublishable. She writes so much good shit. Let me I'll grab a link real quick.
Okay. Yeah,
Um
sunscreen. Get some of that Korean sunscreen because the United States makes it illegal for us to have good enough sunscreen.
yeah, sunscreen and moisturizer. Sunscreen can I learned this recently too as somebody who has tanned every year of my life without sunscreen. I'm dumb. Whatever. Sunscreen also repairs sun damage. It doesn't just prevent it. It does
What?
also repair it. So, yeah. So, get yourself shoplift some CeraVe because they support Israel. It's just shoplift it because it is decent, or get the Target, whatever the off-brand version. Um, yeah, really amazing Substack there. She talks a lot about just the environmental effects of the beauty industry, the way that the production of these things is involved in just the oppression of people worldwide. Just it's fucking, and also not scientifically supported. So fuck yeah. Okay, rant over. Thank you. Sorry.
No, I didn't know that. That's God. It's just that the point is, it's everything, man, and it's
Yeah,
like, and COVID is just the big fucking thing that is like, I don't know, man. The COVID was the thing that was like, how we supposed to, how we supposed to save ourselves from fucking climate change, man. We can't even do COVID. Like, we had all the information, and yeah, yeah. It's I'm tangenting and making it a larger thing, but it's, yeah. If you feel insane because of all this shit, I'm there with you. Is my point.
yeah,
And
yeah. It's
yeah,
fucking crazy, man.
so but yeah, I think that there's points to be made about that. What is it, Freddie De Boer article?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But first we should around that stuff. But first we should talk about the good response to the NPR article.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there were many really good responses to it from actual disabled and immunocompromised people who were rightly like, "What the fuck? Why are we centering somebody who's just sad about restaurants in this?
Yeah.
And
Did you
here's what
want to
it's
pull?
actually like having to live with this fear."
Did you want to pull that
The
up?
Tom Skaka or
Yeah, the Tom
sure,
Scott one.
yeah, sure, yeah, I'll do that. So
This.
this is from Tom Skaka. He was a writer at Gawker, so you might remember that. But like everybody else, because there's no more media jobs anymore, um, he has a Substack,
It
indignity.substack.com.
it is behind a paywall, but yeah.
Yeah, so we can only get a preview here. Um, the spouse who won't get back to normal. So he's talking about Malaka Gharib's NPR essay, and just kind of goes into, because he is a reporter, kind of the like journalistic failures of this kind of reporting. A folk belief took hold among journalists that an essay is where you share your guilty feelings with the public. That's become such a thing. I feel like that's so many different articles that we've shared
Yeah.
in recent months, is just somebody saying, here's some fucked up thing I did or didn't know about. I am a clown for you to throw tomatoes at. And again, because that will generate clicks. That's what reporting is
Yeah,
today.
it's and we've talked about it in the past. I don't know about this article in particular because I feel like people are so in their bubble about COVID and really don't think it exists anymore. Like, unless you are
Mm-hmm.
sort of like in these like Twitter bubbles where it's like people are, really upset about it. Like, it it just doesn't exist. Nobody gives a shit anymore. Um but uh a lot of them, it's like the editor had, so I don't know about this article in particular, but a lot of times it's like they know that the fucking author is going to get ripped to shreds. Like, I mean, this author too, the author that wrote the NPR article is is offline, is shut down. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she deleted or went privated her Twitter, like, because, and it's like, these are the kinds of decisions editors should know, and they
Mm-hmm.
probably do know and don't care. Like, yeah,
Oh yeah.
throw yourself into the sharks. Like,
Yeah, it's completely predatory. And I've interfaced with this stuff a lot of different times in a lot of different ways. You get sent contracts that say that they own the right to your life story forever. Just like popular paying magazines. Don't ever write for Hello Alma, by the way. They take a story that they know is gonna have a really strong hook
Yeah.
and generate a lot of outrage clickbait because that's one of the only ways to generate, in NPR's case, donations, and subscriptions, and in most other outlets' cases, memberships and ad revenue. Um, you know, it's a completely fucked up incentive structure and just another way in which capitalist incentives have just ruined everything and
Right.
given people no leg to stand on.
Yeah. News cannot exist under capitalism. Um,
Mhm. Yeah. Um, there's some conversation in the chat about shoplifting. Medkip said, "I'm scared of shoplifting, but also want to. I assumed there would be something at the doors to check out, which would beep at me if I took anything. They are not magic. Like stores are not magic. Like
we have a stream where we talked about this too.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
if anybody,
Some things have the
let me, I'll look and see if I can remember if I can link it.
yeah. What you want to look at is the camera coverage, but some cameras are fake. Look at the security presence. Steal from like Dollar Tree. Steal from like shitty places because they're usually not going to invest in security. And unless a item has like those little silver stickers on them, that'll set off a detector. Most products do not have that. Most stores don't put it on all products. Oh yeah, when I worked at Hallmark, we just had fake cameras. It is worth being cautious, and I recommend stealing more from companies that don't have the means.
I think it was the
Clamp down
disobedience
on
and
you.
distress tolerance stream,
Yes, yeah,
right?
I think that's right. Yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah, we did a whole thing about disobedience and tolerance for neurodivergent people, and Devin shared his shoplifting tips, which will
Mhm.
never come back to bite us, but we don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine.
Can those silver stickers still be deactivated with a strong magnet? I don't know. Probably, but
That
I don't
is
know enough to say.
I just peel those shits off, honestly. Just peel the
Yeah.
stickers off. Like that's pretty easy to do. If it's the ink ones, you can use a magnet or even a sometimes I'll be careful with shoplifting from Target, but one way you can is like just
Target
you can use
is,
a key to just pry off there.
yeah, be very careful.
Right.
Target has their literally has their own forensic um like department, and will um that the cops will actually outsource to, and it's so big, and also they will intentionally, like, other places probably do this too, but I know they specifically will wait until you've crossed the like $1,200 threshold to make it a felony.
Mhm.
Yeah, Target, don't steal from Target. It's not worth it.
Or keep a meticulous track, which I'm totally doing.
God. Devin,
Make
I can't do the show without you. You can't get arrested for shoplifting. It's not worth it.
It'll be fine. They can't see what I'm doing in the fitting rooms.
Can
Um,
they?
mm,
Don't.
I'm pretty sure they can. I don't know. We'll find out. This is another article since it's not paywall that's also nice to highlight. I'll put a link in the chat too. This is on Caddy Wampus's Heather Hogan's Substack, and this one is just like a conversation between it's a lesbian couple, one of them of whom is immunocompromised and one of them not, talking about how they make things work. Like basically the antidote to what the NPR article really should have been. What it was, and instead what it should have been. Uh, two people who care about each other, just kind of talking about like what are the challenges.
And our lesbian pastimes. I mean, that's important.
Yeah, our lesbian pastimes. Um, yeah, and here, so Heather is the author of the piece, is the one who is not who is immunocompromised. Um, and she says here, we've given up a lot of things that we love, but never, not one single time have I felt your frustration directed at me about those sacrifices. You've never ever asked me to compromise my own health or safety or even peace of mind so we could do something fun.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a part later where her partner Sarah says something like, "Oh, here it is. Am I mad? Yes, I'm fucking mad, but not at you. Do I want to go to New York Liberty games? Yes, but here's the thing: the stuff that I miss like that, it's stuff I did with you. I miss other people and socializing and stuff sometimes, but most of the stuff I wish we could do is just stuff with you in a different location. You're my favorite person. You're the best person I know. You're the person I enjoy being around and experiencing life with more than anyone. Why would I risk you getting sicker so I can get a fucking mimosa at a mediocre restaurant?"
Yeah. Yeah. It
Just so
sucks
beautiful.
that this is yeah. It sucks that this is um on any immunocompromised people and their partners. And I'm not somebody who is like completely locked down cuz I don't believe that I need to be. Um but and I have a huge amount of respect for people, obviously for people that do it for their partners. But that doesn't mean that I think it's their fucking partner's fault. It's
Right.
so wild to put that on your partner, and so disgusting. It is really
Mhm.
hard to imagine that relationship as at all healthy, like outside of
Yeah.
this stuff, because of the way that that's framed.
Yeah. It's so cruel. Like you can talk about loss, you can talk about the cost of how hard it is to do all of the right things. Even something like just researching to make sure you're getting the right kinds of masks and
Yeah,
that they're not dupes on Amazon that aren't even actually protecting you. Like it is hard to cover all of these bases, but to put that on your partner who doesn't even really have the choice when you do is just fucking heinous.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um So yeah, let's actually since you brought it up, let's talk a little bit about like how do you personally make decisions about like what about your risk profile, about what you're going to do? Does it change over time based on the season or the wastewater levels? Like what does that decision making process for various things look like for you?
I think it's not. I think I probably don't do as much as I don't know. I think we probably all feel like a lot of us don't feel like we do as much as we should. Um, I think I do. I do worry. Like I've had a lot of health stuff, and have gone, and I do not know how much COVID has been a factor in it. More and more, I worry that that long COVID is a big part of it. Um, and so I probably should be taking more precautions for myself because of that. Um, but yeah, I mean, mostly I mask everywhere because it's just so easy to do. Like I don't understand why people are so averse to it. And I know that I don't wear glasses. That's one thing. I will admit that.
Mhm.
That makes it a lot more annoying. But yeah, if I'm going to a store, if I don't really mask outside, but like if I'm going in a place with a bunch of people, I just mask because it's just easy. Yeah, I will admit, yeah, Trans Peaks masking gives +3 stealth to checks for trans women too. Absolutely, I definitely do mask more because I'm like, I don't always wear makeup when I mask. That's nice. I don't have to like worry about getting. I mean, I'm gonna get clocked regardless, but I don't have to worry about somebody seeing like beard stubble or something if I fucking haven't done makeup or something. Um, but yeah, I think that um, probably what I should be doing is what I'd like to be doing is more closely monitoring the the wastewater stuff and stuff like that and adjusting things because I do go to restaurants not regularly, but I do go sometimes, and I think probably that would be like a really good step is to be like, well, I don't always go to restaurants, but when I do, I make sure that it's like the waste it's not we're not in a spike. Um but
Mhm.
yeah, so I'm not somebody who locks down really hard. Um
Mhm.
where are you at with that stuff?
Yeah, I do, I do tend to rely on a few trusted friends who I know, like, work in biomedicine and have a good handle on wastewater data sources to kind of see where are we at this time of year? What are the good seasons? What are the bad seasons? And regulate a little bit how much I go out to, like, the club or, like, things like that, where it is just, like, a lot of like, a high risk and not necessary for life kind of thing, right?
Right.
Uh, I tend to not mask outside. I tend to I I work from home.
Yeah.
I am not around people who are at risk, older people, immunocompromised people physically all that often unless I know that I'm going to be.
Mhm.
Um, and so then it's pretty easy to like be cautious in how I meet with them or where I meet with them. Um, I think I think definitely there's always more that like I should be doing, right? Like I should test more.
Yeah.
Um, I really only test when I feel off and it's very hard to know like what's even useful about the test information anyway now these days. There's a lot of false
It's
negatives.
it's so frustrating how um yeah, how bad that stuff is that we don't have the like drive-in stuff anymore. Um
Mhm. Yeah, way fewer PCR sites and things like that.
yeah.
I, yeah, for a long time, my risk tolerance window was wider than a lot of people because I just wasn't around anyone anyway. So it was very possible for me to not even like I don't ride public transit more than I have to because it gives me really bad sensory issues and makes me throw up anyway. So that meant I could just walk to, whatever the sex club or whatever the fuck and like
Right.
okay, we're all there. We know we have a risk of whatever. But I still also, like I've been to concerts. I definitely hit like street festivals and music festivals and things like that pretty hard. Um, and can definitely with outdoor things is definitely where I am the most like foolhardy, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, but it is also like it varies and like just there are some risks that you take that you're just like, well, this wasn't even worth it. I don't even
Yeah.
like restaurants shouldn't exist anyway. They're an
Yeah.
inherently exploitative, inefficient model. Like
Yeah.
we've talked about that before on this show. Like if somebody wants to do that as a way to like if that's the way of like socializing that's like accessible to them for whatever reason, like I will sometimes do that, but like there's a lot of things that are like, oh, this is if I was going to be around anyone that was at risk or if I was going to be around people at work or something like that, I would not need to do this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also lucky that I mean that I am not I don't am not around somebody. I don't have anybody in my close life that is like really immunocompromised, but it it just the lack of empathy in this conversation for having somebody like that in your life and like blaming them for this
mhm.
stuff is really disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard enough to make these asks of people, to
Yeah.
make them show that they care for you in protecting you in those ways, and so to add that layer of, like, s acting like they're being, like, a scold or a nag
Yeah. The
by, like, trying
entitlement.
to share Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Photo, said, "Even though I have long COVID, I stopped masking as much. One of my kids won't mask for sensory stuff, so I end up masking less often when I am with my kid. And I
Yeah.
make a lot of choices about taking my kids places despite COVID because of mental health stuff. It
Yeah.
sucks to make the choice though." Yeah, that is something I just wanted to highlight because, like, yeah, and I've gotten some asks from other disabled people in the past who've said they masking was really tough for them for sensory reasons or other disability reasons. So
Yeah.
those things
That
do
under that's
exist.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And that's part of like those are vulnerable disabled people
Yeah.
that we collectively are supposed to protect by masking and vaccinating. You know,
Right.
like one of my friends who identifies as low functioning, who some of you have heard me talk about before, he can't mask. Like he like he can have conversations with people online about why it's important. He understands what COVID is, but he can't remember in the moment. Like he can't make himself not take it off.
Yeah.
Like that's just not how like his processing works. So those things are real, and I think it is a really important like disability justice principle that if somebody says they can't do something, we believe them
Yeah.
for reasons of disability, right? But that also is just all the more reason why it's important for us to do it if we can do it, because that,
Yeah.
you know, that kid, that low functioning identified autistic kid, he is high risk. He has had lots of health problems. If he got COVID, it would be a bad time. And he does take COVID seriously. He does believe it's a problem. And
Right.
but he still can't mask. And so that's why it's important that everyone on his care team mask and his friends
Yeah.
in person mask and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, oh, got a hydrate regime. Thank you. I am Yam.
Yeah, I have to figure out why that doesn't ping anymore. Some things are being fucky.
Yeah. Yeah. Twitch and OBS and everything. There's a lot of working parts. Um,
Yeah, in Panulian, China, Hong Kong, a higher percentage of people mask in public transit, malls, etc. Here in Germany, I literally see almost no one. Yeah, I am almost always the only person masking in a given space.
really?
Um,
Wow.
yeah, it is dire where I'm at, which is so depressing. Even even in like in Ann Arbor, which is like liberal college town, it is very very very. If I am not the only person, I am a very small minority,
Hmm.
including all of the including medical staff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a thing that's come up a lot already in the chat and in our conversation that's probably worth delving into is just like medical staff not taking COVID seriously and like how do we that's a whole other I mean that's a whole wormhole, but like it feels like an important thing to talk about.
Yeah,
Um, but I felt there was something else in the chat that I wanted to
yeah. There
say
was a lot
about
of good.
masking.
There
Yeah,
was a lot of good chat.
yeah. Oh, Matt, Little Witch B said I only mask on, or just like making sure to mask on public transit still. Lots of
Yeah,
people saying they mask anywhere indoors. Mask, Panoli says I mask to help other people feel less self conscious about wearing a mask.
yeah.
Um, Masking anytime you go indoors.
I saw a
Yeah.
fucking sign that I don't know where it was, but it was a sign that said, it was posted on the door of a fucking doctor's office that said, you have to take your mask and glasses off to enter here. You can put them back on. And it's like, I mean, that's another huge component of this where it's like, I mean, masking is a big reason why the like governments are not prioritizing masking is because it prevents them from using facial recognition. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you are like if you're going like if you go to a protest, fucking mask like
Yes.
and that is not only for COVID, but like just like you should have been like it was a good idea to be masking at protests before the pandemic. Like this
Right.
is really like for fucking OPSEC. Like, and this is a big
Mm-hmm.
reason why this stuff. I mean, there are places where masking has been made illegal, which is nuts to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Here in Chicago, they've essentially criminalized wearing any kind of balaclava style mask. So um, anything but eyes covered, everything covered except for your eyes, um, which sucks for a lot of reasons. It's Islamophobic. It's
Yeah. Yep.
bad for protesters. It's bad for when it does still sometimes get cold here. Um, And masks also protect you if the cops tear gas you a little bit, goggles and a face mask. Um, and I will say that, like, the actions I've been to have been really, really good. I would say about 80%, let's say
That's really good.
75 to 80% of people masked, and people handing out masks as well as like food and water, which is how it should be. And it's always a useful thing to contribute. If you can't be on the line yourself, putting your own body at risk, you can still be handing out masks and things like that at protests in many cases. And yeah, I would say public transit, it's pretty dire, but there's always people masking, it's always elders, um, and black and brown people mask really consistently on public
Yeah.
transit here,
Yeah. Oh,
and
that's the thing that
white
I
people and young people do not. Yeah.
yes, it is wild to see the how many and I feel like so few people mask now. But I distinctly remember as masking was like still a thing, but becoming a little like how often I would see uh like a straight white couple and and the fucking woman would be masking and the guy would not be. It is so
Mhm,
depressing how often I see these things. It is way more likely for people of color, for in my anecdotal experience, to be masking. It is more likely, but unfortunately not as like it's not as big of a breakdown as I would like, or ratio as I would like to see it, but it is more likely to see queer people masking. Um, and it's just like white men white straight men are the ones that
mhm,
like consistently are not masking as much, and it is wild to see the way that the like on every strata of minority it feels like it breaks down that like in that direction.
mhm. Yeah, it's not masculine to have any concern for your health,
Right, right.
basically,
Yeah,
um,
and I also have
to
to
look after yourself.
I also have to assume, people of color like just are more at risk because of all of the different, all these different race like racist and class factors and all that stuff.
Mhm, yeah. Um, Gluteus Blasphemous, first time chatter, great name, welcome, said,
It's
"I
really
don't
good.
travel." Really good name. "I don't travel on flights or go clubbing nowadays despite being really outgoing before because I have health issues I can't afford to get worse if I got COVID again. But it feels really lonely to be the only person I know doing that, especially because now it
Yeah.
feels my partner is being deprived of experiences."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's dark because, in 2020, Maddie, you and I, we went to a lot of virtual concerts and DJ sets
Yeah.
online. There was so much that was available, and there are groups like Clean Air Club, I know just did a big, like, online dance party thing. Obviously, there's lots of DJs and stuff like that on Twitch. Like, there are spaces where disabled people, Reclaim Ugly, project also has a lot of events, but not on the level that we used to see.
Yeah.
Because there really does just need to be outlets for extroverted people, lonely people, sensory seeking, sensation seeking people to be able to socialize and get energy out and feed off of other people's energy in a positive way
Yeah.
virtually. And like gosh, like for so many like autistic people too and ADHDers too, like
Yeah.
regardless of their COVID risk profile, it's it's more affordable, it's more accessible. You're in control of the temperature, the lighting, everything. You don't have to spend fucking $25 on a fucking smart bar ticket and fucking $18 drinks and shit, like,
Yeah.
on every level,
They were so
people so much need that.
that stuff was so fucking fun. Like I miss that stuff. Um yeah, we did the Minecraft 100 Gex show was at Lavapalooza, was really fun.
Mhm.
We did a
Yeah.
bunch of Zoom party. Dorian Electra did a bunch of Zoom parties that we went to. That shit was so fucking fun. And I think a lot of the hyperpop scene that we have now comes out of that stuff because it was so accessible, not only to um, like the concert goers, but also to like the performers. Like
Mhm.
so much of that scene came out of that, and it was yeah, really really cool stuff.
Yeah. Photo, can you remind me, of the Needle Play show? Like, who put on that Needle Play show, the organization? Um, Photo's talking in the chat about virtual burlesque shows they used to go to, but I also know that a mutual or a friend of mine there's a sex worker, a disabled and sex worker collective that does both virtual and in person shows. Um, Still, I believe. Just want to link to that if we can remember the name of it.
We have to do
Uh,
some virtual like events. We talked about doing uh we've talked about doing uh
yeah,
there
Click
dot
Clack Club. Thank you. Sorry.
no, you're good. We talked about doing a what was it there.com fucking party.
Oh yeah.
We've talked about doing VR chat meetups. We got to do that.
Oh, shit. Yeah, we got to get back into that stuff because that shit is so fun and it's so chaotic and like
Yeah.
you can do all the same things. Like sometimes you just want to get like a little drunk or a little stoned and just while out a little bit, and you can
Yeah.
do that while being a giant 3D beaver.
If anybody has any experience doing anything, let us know because that is a thing that we want to do for sure, and we've just kind of had in the back burner. Um, so if anybody wants to help with some of that stuff,
Yeah, yeah. Let us know. Hit us up in DMs or on the Piscord or something. Um, yeah.
I once took a little fold up chair to a rave, and my friend complimented me and said it was brilliant. That is brilliant. That's great.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I do go to concerts. I'm actually going. I'm going to a Dorian Electric concert tonight, which I'm excited about. I've heard in the they've I think they've been better about asking people to mask. So I'm hopeful they do this time too. It's so disappointing to see. It was so disappointing to see all of the masking requirements go out the window for music stuff because
Yeah.
that made me feel so much more safe when we were doing that. Um, but uh, yeah, it's I wish that people were doing more of that. But the reason, also a big reason I bring it up is I do have a lot of uh, fatigue issues, and so I hit a wall always now, which I did before because I'm so tall and feel so anxious about being in people's way. But yeah, now it is a requirement that I hit a wall the best is a pole. If there's a fucking pole somewhere, if it's small enough that there's like a pole somewhere you can lean on, that shit is fucking premium.
Mm, yeah. When they have like seating at the venue, like half the time what I do at the club is I'm like on this chair fucked up reading a book like and just vibing anyway. Like we there's so many accessibility things that are missing from concert venues and event spaces and clubs and stuff. Like
And like we were saying, the HVAC stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff would be so
mhm,
much. I mean, it's not totally mitigated, but it could be wildly improved with uh with uh with better HVAC.
mhm,
Corey Nate says, I was invited to a play party recently and I really want to go, but my COVID concerns and the sudden change in habits would give me the bends, honestly. Yeah,
mhm,
I and it's that kind of thing is frustrating because with a COVID with a play party that's small enough that like you could really do some, masking would be probably hard at a play party, but you could, have vaccine requirements. You could have everybody test beforehand. Like that's really really um viable.
mhm,
I like having parties at my house. And um I do I've had I have a couple parties like big parties every year, and one thing that I do is I keep all the windows open as much as I can. I actually I have some I have two what are they not FEMA HEPA filters, like
mm,
fans that I keep going. Um, it's like not that hard to like do small things that can improve it, because that is the big thing, like is that it's all of these things add up um to better risk profiles, and it's not
right.
that hard to do. It might not be feasible for shows to do to require masking and vaccines anymore, but it sure as hell is feasible for them to encourage it. It sure as hell is feasible for musicians who are touring to encourage masking at their shows.
Mhm.
And people aren't doing that.
Yeah. And you can require it for, like, events. There 'cause there
Yeah.
still are events that do it. Like, Gavin was just talking in the chat about how a lot of the local drag shows that he goes to require masking and how they still do well in terms of attendance and sales. And, I know it tends to be, like, the more DIY kinda stuff here and the more radical stuff here that still does it.
Yeah.
But
You
it can still
can.
be done. Yeah. Hand out masks and require them. That's one thing that Howard Brown Health Center, which I'll shit on endlessly, and I hate them, but they do require you to put on a mask before you even enter even their pharmacy, any part of their facility. You have to have a mask on, and they will yell at you, and they will hand you a fucking mask. Like,
Ridiculous that that's not the norm for medical
yeah,
establishments. I saw that
yeah.
the last guy in an iron lung died of COVID this
Oh my
past
god.
week or month. He was living in a fucking iron lung for 70 years. Um and because you know, like because we came together for what was polio and like did things to fucking like keep those people alive, and
Mhm.
just apathy towards people's health killed him after fucking 70 years of you know it's it's so depressing.
And and people don't realize that, like, what we think of as polio now, that is long polio. That's
Yeah.
the equivalent of long COVID, that lots of
Yeah.
people got polio without any serious long-term effects, and the people who became disabled from it were the people who had basically a complication that was there was no way of mitigating it because there was no healthcare response until we had the vaccine,
Right.
and so that's why we don't have people disabled in that way anymore, um, is
Yeah.
because in that case, the vaccine worked so well and the public health response was so consistent that
Yep.
until until we had anti-vaxxers come and fuck up all of that, and now measles and mumps and all of these things are
Measles are
on the
back.
rise again.
Measles, that's another
Yep.
thing. Measles are back. That I my understanding of measles is that it literally destroys, like completely erases your immune response. Every single sickness you've ever gotten and all of the immunity that you've built up to every single fucking like bacteria and disease you've ever gotten, it's just erased. You just don't have it anymore.
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh, Sex Geneity says, "Jonas Salk got standing ovations on planes regularly, but hey, fuck the libs for making me shut my fucking mouth."
yeah.
Yeah, America has always been an evil country, but there did culturally at least be used to be some idea of, like, sacrifice for the whole,
Yeah.
and some of that was used for really awful, like, militaristic, jingoistic shit. But when it comes to public health, there was, like, some sense of, like, you have a responsibility to the collective that just is not there anymore,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, at all.
It really feels captured by capitalist interest, you know? That's why COVID denial, I mean, yeah, I fully believe that is why COVID denial exists. In both forms, in the form of conservative, I mean, conspiracy theory stuff, which we haven't even talked about because obviously it's so disgusting and you know, the same as all that other fascist stuff. But it's the same reason why there's the like liberal denial of it that we're talking about here, because it is not, you know, it's not blood for the blood machine.
Mhm. Yeah. The completely manufactured fear of people's kids becoming autistic and all of the
Yeah.
misinformation around that
Yeah.
really laid out the groundwork. There were already so many people, refusing vaccinations for their kids and themselves, and that has been just fomented now for decades. That along with just, like, the institutional breakdown of healthcare in this country and so many other things and journalism and public health research.
Yeah.
It's really created a perfect storm where it's really, really hard. It's really hard to get people on the same page about anything
Yeah.
related to health.
Yeah. We've talked about it before, but that, that's my mom. Is she's an anti-vaxxer, and it's because, she didn't get the support that she needed for her deeply, deeply disabled kid. And it's like, well, when you're not getting when the system is so, you know, is rejecting you so, you know, explicitly and in every form, it's not surprising when people go to that stuff, you know, when people believe propaganda that tells them that they'll have control over their health outcomes.
Right. Yeah. And maybe this would be a good time to talk about the healthcare professionals stuff. Um, because it's such a fucked up situation, right? Like so many people in the chat shared stories of this, of nurses not masking, of doctors during lockdown saying it's okay if you want to take off your mask to feel more comfortable. Um, doctors wearing surgical masks instead of
Yeah.
KN95s, all of this stuff, and people people being institutionalized for wanting to mask. And it's I like just think back on how much their lives have been treated as disposable this whole time,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how the people that I know that have gone into medicine or any kind of frontline work are people who can handle seeing blood, they can handle seeing dead bodies. They maybe even find it a little bit exciting to be in dangerous situations, and how that's like a good thing that that diversity exists in humans, right? Like it's good that we have
Yeah.
people like that. I could not be doing that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
but that also means that they're more predisposed, I think, to being kind of foolhardy about certain things. And then you add into that how inaccessible medical care is for anybody who's disabled because the hours are so long and it's such a grueling job, and how they just basically like compassion fatigue the fuck out of people.
Yeah. And just the whole residency system of working 24 hours a day, during and being on call constantly, and like the way people are, the medical school is like a just abuse. Like everything I've heard about it
Mm-hmm.
is just disgusting abuse. And so it's also people that are, only people that are able to do that. Disabled people can't be doctors. Like it's just a fact. And
Mm-hmm.
so um that wisdom is not, and lived experience just doesn't exist in the medical field, because you know it's not possible to go through that while being disabled in almost any real way.
Right. Yeah. It just systematically excludes people who have any knowledge of these things, and therefore you breed the most, and it just has a culture of like you have to work these long hours, put up or shut up, you need to be tough. And so it makes them a population that's really unsympathetic to patients in pain
Yeah.
in any way.
Yeah. They
Um,
have they we are creating a population of people who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, because we
mhm.
have built a system in which that's required. Uh yeah.
Yeah. Um, is that Seb in the chat? Yeah, Seb. So in the UK, we had so much trouble accessing PPE here because of the government giving contracts to their friends with no experience in that business. And then they either delivered nothing or loads of defective masks and gowns, etc., that all had to be disposed of.
Yeah.
Um, lots of similar stuff here in the US too, like not enough protective equipment. Um,
And then hoarding the protective equipment that does exist, like that was a big thing too, of like government stockpiles, and then them all the masks and stuff going bad because they eventually all that stuff does have expiration dates, and so all that stuff goes bad because the government is just stockpiling it somewhere.
Hmm. And we were encouraged at the beginning of the pandemic not to buy masks. Like, that was
Yeah,
one of the first messages we all got, at
yeah,
least as the American public.
yep,
Don't buy masks because they need to be saved for the doctors and the high risk, frontline workers.
yep.
So that was the first little crack in the messaging wall because immediately we had to go back on that within like a few weeks.
And we did. I don't think there was a concerted effort to go back on it. I think that's the thing is the whole time it's just like nobody wants to go, nobody wants to strain, like it can only go, it can, restrictions can only get loosened. um they can never
Right.
be like, the CDC has even brought back different masking mandate, or not mandates but recommendations at different times, and nobody fucking talks about it because like nobody cares because
Hmm.
restrictions can only be alleviated, which is the same system that you know that ratchet effect of Democrat and Republican. It's things can only move to the right and only move to a more fascist direction, and
Right.
and Democrats at their best keep things at the status quo.
Right. Not to mention that the Biden administration literally presented removing your mask as a reward for getting vaccinated.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I was thinking about earlier. That's what I was trying to remember of that moment.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
It really was this, again, this very liberal framing of you do this good thing, you get a
Right.
treat.
Right.
You get to remove your mask. You should look forward to removing your mask. And the minute you frame it as this punishment,
Right.
like, I mean, even my workplace, the policy for a while was you had to have a vaccine to be on campus, and if you weren't vaccinated, you had to wear a mask.
Yeah.
That completely fucks up how people think of masks, and then they see it as a punishment
And it
and
was
sees
so
it as marking issue as unvaxxed, which is not good.
yeah, it was so stupid because also like one that's not the way it worked. That vaccines were never the complete miracle that we, I mean, as much of a miracle as they are, and let's not get that wrong. We're extremely lucky that the pandemic happened in 2020 and not 2015, because the research into mRNA technology and that kind of stuff allowed us to have vaccines at the pace and level that we did, and that shit would not have happened like a couple years before that. It just wouldn't have been possible, and that is a miracle. But it is not a cure. It does not it is one level of I've heard it described as like Swiss cheese, right? Like you have a bunch of layers of Swiss cheese from between you and COVID, right? And every precaution you take is not a full barrier. It is just a permeable barrier that you're adding more and more on top of.
Right.
But yeah, like you were saying, the masks being you know treated as punishment, but that's just not how it worked. Um, I had a more of a point, but I'm forgetting. Yeah, it just was so, yeah, and then like the people that weren't getting vaccinated, that was the big thing that pissed me off about that announcement and like public health tactic was it was. Do you think the people that aren't getting vaxxed because they're anti-vax are going to respect mask mandates? Like, of
Right.
course, the people that aren't getting vaxxed aren't going to fucking vaccinate, aren't gonna fucking mask. And there wasn't any actual, like, if there was some like law and punishment about that, okay, maybe that could have worked to force anti-vaxxers to wear masks. But there wasn't ever any actual like system to and like enforcement or something. So it's like, why would you think people are going to do that? It was
Right.
the amount of people that like would follow that kind of direction but weren't getting vaccinated was so vanishingly thin that it was like irrelevant.
Yeah. I mean, and like in terms of enforcement, anybody who's worked food service, baristaing, anything like that, asking customers to mask in those days, even when it was still mandated, the amount
Right.
of people who had coffee thrown in their face, screamed at, spit on, threatened, assaulted for asking people to even when they had the legal protection supposedly behind them
Right.
of masks being required, it was impossible to enforce. There was no enforcing body,
Right.
which is always, a question with when you are instituting a policy. How are you going to actually facilitate that people follow that policy? What is the means of encouragement and enforcement going to look like? And there wasn't any. Um, and unfortunately, that's still a risk that people who even just mask for themselves
Yeah.
have to worry about. A friend of mine is on the Christian TV show The Chosen, and
What?
it's
What? What? Like on it?
yeah, he's on it. He plays like Judas's best friend and Jewish merchant,
You
whatever.
can't just drop what? That's
This is the biggest. The
crazy.
Chosen is the biggest crowdfunding success of all time, and it's on a Christian app. It's this like Jesus show, and they hire all these like Jewish queer people to like people in it.
I've never
But
heard of this, any part of this, let alone that you have this personal connection to it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My friend Josh Zagorin, he's Jewish merchant, whatever, on The Chosen, and it films out in Provo, Utah,
Oh yeah.
because the Mormons own all of this like desert land that's very useful for filming. And if he walks around that town with a mask on, people will follow him in a pickup truck screaming at him.
Yeah.
Like,
Jesus.
and it's been that way since 2020, since they started working on that show.
I haven't had that experience, but I fucking feel it. I'm very lucky that I haven't had people actually yell at me, but, you know. My queer
Yeah.
friend does hair for The Chosen. What the fuck is this? Do we have to like do we have to like
People are saying oily Josh, Yeshua. Yes. Asu. Yeah, maybe we could have him on. He's also like
I would love that.
TikTok famous because of his bird puppet, Chad the Bird. We used to be in a comedy show together at the Green Mill. He's still in it.
Yes.
Yeah, and he streams also as Chad the Bird
Yes. Can we
puppet.
can we
Yeah.
do this?
Yeah, we could have him on. Yeah, we could have him on. He's always down, he's an actor, so he lives for the applause. Um,
Yeah, we'll have to watch some of The Chosen, whether we stream it or we just watch it
that's a
and
good
talk about
idea.
it. Uh,
I'm gonna add it to the list right now before I forget because that sounds fun and stupid, and
and it
I
feels
know
like a
he'll
thing
say
that they're
that.
not gonna take. They're not gonna DMCA.
Yeah. Oh my god.
I'm
But
looking. I'm looking up The Chosen full episodes on YouTube.
oh my god. I mean, we can watch it on, my favorite website,
Well, I just no.
fmovies.to.
I just mean if it's already on there. Well, if it's already on there, but I was gonna.
Oh no.
It won't get taken down. But apparently, the full episodes are just on YouTube from the channel itself. They just have it all on
Oh
there
wow.
because it's.
Wow.
So I don't know if that doesn't really tell me if it'll get DMCA'd on YouTube, but
Yeah, we can find out. I can yeah, because it's not like run owned by like a studio or anything. It's just this like Christian app you have to buy to
app.
like access it.
It's the Bible app that has
Yeah.
TV shows too.
And yet it's like one of the most hugely like well-funded productions. Like this is
Of
somebody who's like
course.
acting union, SAG member, and he's like, this is they ball out on this more than like he's been on Chicago Fire a bunch of times, and it's like no, The Chosen is where it's fucking at. They like
Oh yeah,
pay
that
so
doesn't
much better
surprise me at all.
than the Dick Wolf production. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, oily Josh.
Okay.
Ah.
Um but anyway, should we talk about this fucking what's his fucking fuck face?
Yeah.
This thing made me more I maybe may have there were like specific lines of this that maybe made me more mad than the original NPR article, and I don't know why. It's just
It's because he's so smug.
he's so fucking smug.
And that is his whole deal. Um, Freddy's whole deal is smugness. I'm trying to load it right now on the screen share, and it's being fucky for a reason. For some reason, let me
That
see.
one wasn't. I think I have. Do I have it up? I don't have it up, but I can bring it up on mine.
Okay, yeah, I don't know why my screen share isn't loading now. That's weird.
Freddie DuBois. What? Who is this
Yes.
guy? You follow this guy for his bad
Mhm.
takes. So what?
Um,
What is his deal? I don't know this guy.
yeah, so Freddie DeBoer is a Marxist writer,
Seriously?
who yeah, who comes from, like, a long line of, like, Marxist academics. His PhD is in rhetoric, which is just very funny because we were in graduate school at the same time, and I almost went to school for rhetoric. Um, the way he writes is very debate team guy in
Yeah.
a way that's, like, very recognizable. Um, he, uh he's an interesting person. He used to mostly do like he was like a blogger. He was a big blogger in the early 2000s, of the kind of like less wrong kind of set,
Mhm.
like lefty, you know, but not necessarily the most social justice oriented, let's say. Um
PhD in
and
actually PhD in the piss course.
literally um and he got canceled a few years ago for um he's bipolar, and he had a manic episode where he accused another journalist of sexually assaulting him that was completely not true. And after he got institutionalized and medicated, he handled it, I think, very very well. He was like, this was completely true untrue. I'm very sorry for everything I did to Malcolm Harris. I'm making a commitment to like look after my own mental health better so that I don't do these things to people, and I accept any consequences. Like, I accept moral culpability for this. So like, because of that experience, and I think because of his relationship to bipolar, he has a lot of disability takes that are kind of weird, like a little bit of like you have to take responsibility for your own disability
Yeah.
stuff. He's very all disability is bad, and if somebody's like proud of it, they're not really disabled, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Very like we've been he and I have been on a podcast before together about neurodiversity stuff because he's very much of the like people who have easy, cushy work from home jobs and are privileged and high functioning. He would use that phrase, are high functioning, um, and are now claiming the autism label. Like they're speaking over more seriously disabled people, and it's this great injustice and blah blah blah. Like he's one of those kind of people. Um,
Yeah, he makes some allusions to self-diagnosis here that while not spelled out made it pretty obvious that he's a anti self-diagnosis guy.
right. Yeah. The way he talks about trigger warnings here is like a whole thing I could go into for a while.
We're gonna have to
Um,
talk about it at least a little bit because
yeah,
wow,
because who
wow.
even it's very weird. It's very bizarre. Um, the Argyle said, "No one tells Social Security disability that I am proud, or they will take my SSDI away." Yes, it's
It's
so it.
real.
Ugh, it's so infuriating to me how people will
If they could
assume.
do a blood test, if they could do a piss test for disability for mad pride, they would.
Mhm,
If they
yes,
could, if they could make you piss take test for it.
mhm. I fucking hate the implication that anybody who is talking about neurodiversity must have it fucking easy. Like,
Yeah,
it's so fucking annoying. Like, yes, there are problems in our community with us speaking over non-speaking people, speaking over intellectually disabled people. There's a lot of fucking shit that we need to get our house in order about.
yeah. You're the last person to like not to disagree with that kind of like that it, you know, we need to be centering people with less privilege.
Yeah. Yeah, and ultimately disability justice is a structural critique, so it does not matter whether you feel good about your disability, you hate your disability, you wish you didn't have it. You can feel however you fucking want. We all deserve justice on a systemic level. It's not about improving our like mental health positivity. Like,
Yeah,
so Freddie DeBoer often has this annoying take where he like thinks mad pride is literally the politics of everybody needs to be proud of being mad, which is not what it fucking is.
yeah.
It's about it's really mad neutrality,
Hmm.
that all of our lives are like equally valuable regardless of how we fucking feel about ourselves. But
Pride
I
is a
digress.
rejection. Pride is a rejection of um discrimination and you know, like hate. Like you cannot if you are if you have hate leveled against you, the antidote to that is pride. Like, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like I, I don't know. It's like weird. Like you could make the same arguments about, I don't know, queer pride. Like, but that
Mhm.
obviously you wouldn't do that. Like, I don't know. It's not like I don't know. Being queer is this like it's a very it seems like an argument to me that's like, well, you shouldn't be proud of being queer because like that makes it seem like it's a choice. Like, or something.
Right.
Like it's like it doesn't, like if you map that onto queer pride, it doesn't make any fucking sense. um
Yeah. That's a good point because I think you can, yeah, make the same exact argument where it's like, "Well, you shouldn't emphasize queer pride because it's really hard to be queer. Like queer people get hate
right,
crimed and all these horrible things. They're homeless, all these horrible things happen. So if
right,
you're proud of being queer, you must not actually be queer because you're not experiencing those things." It's like,
right.
What?
Yeah, yeah.
No.
And it's
We're
predicate
we're
I think it's probably predicated on this idea that like, and his allusion to self diagnosis really gives the game away, where it's like, well, being queer isn't a choice. Right? Like,
Mhm.
so it's like everyone's queerness is valid, where it's like, well, not everyone's disability is valid. Like some people are just, you know being loud about it being for no reason. um
Yeah. And even if somebody does choose, and I've said this before, if somebody chooses to be disabled, whatever the fuck that means, that's fucking based. Like we are pro gainers and feeders on this fucking channel. We are pro people amputating their own shit because they have like a fetish for it.
did you see
Um
that comic about the I
yeah,
wish
the guy with the amputation fetish. Yeah.
yeah, that shit is like I won't lie, that shit is like upsetting to think about, but it's like also that doesn't like it's a thing I've talked about before. It's like there are certain things where it's like, yeah, that shit makes me uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean like it's bad. Like
Right.
get used to it. People can do
Right.
whatever the fuck they want. Like
Right. If somebody wants to become disabled, we should welcome that because otherwise, we really are just sitting in this belief that it actually is worse to be us. Somebody can choose to be transgender if they want. I think that's fucking cool.
mhm.
Like, if somebody decides they want to be more autistic, whatever the fuck that means to them, I welcome that. Like that's anything else is feeding into this idea that we're supposed to be rare, that we're an aberration, that we're undesirable to be, that we only deserve justice because we can't help it. And that's just not what we should be fighting for. So, yeah, cut your leg off if you want. I think that's fucking cool. Um etc.
But anyway, that's why this guy is for these bad
Mhm.
takes and the ways in which it comes up against the things that you write about. That makes sense.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. So
this
we've been in a lot of same circles. Yeah.
so this this yeah, so this is actually um a response to the what's his name? The
Tom Skaka.
Yeah, so we didn't talk a ton about that, but um it was behind a paywall, so I couldn't read that one. But I think it was kind of just about a lot of the things that we've been talking about, right? And it comes from a perspective of somebody. Tom Skaka is immunocompromised, also,
Mhm.
so it comes from that
Yeah.
perspective too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of a response article to kind of the general genre of, like, I don't know, what DeBoer would probably call, like, yes, Sharticle time.
It's
Uh,
sharticle turducken time, sharticle
yes,
within a sharticle.
layers, a layer cake of shit. This is really a response to, like, the genre of, like, COVID conscious writing that
Right.
DeBoer sees as excessive or where he, ever the pragmatist, wants to ask, well, what do you actually want, though, that's feasible as a disabled person? Like, if you don't have a perfect policy recommendation that's implementable, how dare you fucking be sad? and scared and write
uh,
about that,
yeah,
basically.
the way it starts and a lot, and it feels like a cloaking rather than like an actual um integral part to his point. But a lot, what how it starts is he's like basically like there's a bunch of people on the right that think vaccines are um, a conspiracy. COVID is a conspiracy, and vaccines are the devil, and all this stuff. And uh, and those people are crazy. But also, there are these crazy people on the left who think COVID is going to kill them and possibly kill them and severely injure them. And they're also just as nuts as the people that believe that, you know, the Jews are controlling, are like, have created COVID in a lab to make you gay. Like, it is
Hmm.
so clearly like basically irrelevant to the point other than, and he comes back to this kind of thing a couple times. It is basically irrelevant to the point other than he's just like, well, actually, I'm the enlightened centrist that that people on both sides are wrong.
Yeah, it's classic both sides ism
Right.
of saying, and he'll often do this thing where he'll be like, now, to be clear, I believe COVID is real. I think people should be vaccinated. Like, I'm not some kind of crank. There are these people who are saying unreasonable things, but it is because of this commitment to logic and pragmatism that I can't help but notice these irrationalities also in the people who are claiming to be COVID conscious. Haven't they noticed? Why are they not responding to the data? Why don't they see, from his first graph right at the top of the article, that the excess deaths due to COVID have dropped down to nearly zero?
Yeah.
Um, and I know some people in the chat were talking about that weird term. What does this mean, excess deaths? It is a creepy term. Uh, the term is just basically how many deaths are we seeing each year above what we would statistically normally expect to happen in any given year. So we expect a certain number of heart attacks. We expect a certain number of flu deaths. That we take that as a granted is also fucked up.
Yeah. Right. The amount
Um,
of people that flu killed every year before COVID and continues to kill is not a thing that we should be accepting, and
no,
it's terrifying, uh, like in just deaths, but also in the strain it puts on the medical system and all this stuff. And nobody really cares that much about that either. Go get your flu
right,
shots in addition to your COVID boosters. Like, yeah,
right, yeah, yeah. What the amount of like deaths, especially of disabled and elderly people, that are just built into our system, saying, "Oh, we expect that. That just happens. That's just the cost of business," basically.
right.
When really, COVID should have revealed to us how many preventable deaths we were just taking on, like a flu vaccine mandate at, let's even just say, schools, at universities and schools, K-12. How many lives would that have saved? Just that measure in its own, on its own, annually,
and
and then
and
compounding. It's
and
crazy.
and flu vaccines are that's an insurance payment thing, right? It's not like those are not free too. I think if you're not on insurance, correct me
Mhm.
if I'm wrong, if anybody
Yeah,
knows in the chat. But my understanding is it's like, yeah, it's another thing that it's like if you're uninsured, this isn't
right.
like a
Yeah.
guarantee.
Yeah, so if flu vaccines were free the way that COVID vaccines were free for a while,
Mm,
how many lives would that save?
yep.
But we just decided to just never invest in that as a country.
Because those are acceptable deaths.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, but yeah, so he talks about this kind of both sidesism, which is so wild because even from his conception of it, on one side there are like fascist blood libel like conspiracies that are encouraging anti-vaxxing, which he acknowledges is super deadly, and then on the other side there are people yelling on Twitter. Like like this is so much like he talks. I mean, he also talks about a subreddit too, where it's like, and it's so, this feels like so much a victim of Twitter is Twitter is real life. Like
Mhm.
where it's like I'm so mad that there are all these people yelling about COVID when it's like not. It's just not. It does, no, it isn't a position that exists in mainstream media, which is so
Right.
fucking upsetting. Nobody will talk about in mainstream media will fucking talk about, you know, uh how disabling multiple COVID infections can be and how scary that shit is. But NPR will put out this fucking article about, you know, about how upsetting it is to not be able to go to restaurants, like we've been saying, and it's again this fucking false equivalency.
Right. Yeah, it's completely unbalanced. Um, and how much does it actually, like, shape the political discourse for there to be people who are cautious about COVID online? I mean, for the most part, what is it hurting? And, like,
Right.
I I mean, and I've criticized the way certain messaging is framed in a way that I think is like, this is not the most persuasive way to present this information. Like,
Yeah.
because I do care from a public health perspective, like, if you make people feel too scared or too guilty, fairly or unfairly, they check out and they don't hear you. Like, it sucks that you have to do that kind of tone policing, but if you wanna win people over, like, sometimes you do have to tailor things in a certain way. But also, it's like,
It's
these are sorry, go ahead.
it's the dentist teeth thing, you know. It's like if you show somebody like rotted out teeth, they won't brush their teeth. Like it
Right,
just, you know, it's a classic example.
right. Yeah, if you show people a lung that's been affected by, tobacco smoke, unfortunately, that doesn't motivate people to quit, and that's why actually the tobacco industry has funded smoking cessation campaigns that are really doom and gloom and death focused because it makes people smoke for longer. So, like, yeah, that stuff is important to talk about, but also at the same time, the disabled people who are trying to get the message out about this stuff, they have so little power
Yeah.
and reach other than to each other and people that care about them. So it's very weird for him to make his whole point that, "Oh, some of them might be overestimating the risk," when he can't even prove that, like, the
Yeah.
data is so clearly fucked.
Yeah. A lot of it is about the data. And I mean I'll admit I can't point to better data, but it's yeah, because on every level nobody's collecting the fucking data. And it is not, and he literally does not talk about long COVID in here at all. Is
Mhm.
if unless I'm mistaken, I'm gonna do a control F to see if he even literally mentions it at all. No, there is not a single. I just did a control F long. There's not a single reference to long COVID in here, unless there's one I missed that has different, that I'm not remembering, that has different terminology. But he
Yeah.
focuses so much of, like, his focus is entirely on deaths, which is my understanding still way worse than he is making it out to be. Likely,
Yeah.
likely way worse than he's making it out to be. I mean, he literally says that the data says, one of his argument is that this, with this graph, is that the excess deaths are the, like, for COVID, the lower bound is zero at this point, is what he's saying. So he's literally arguing it's possible nobody's dying of COVID, which is just explicitly not true. Um, but you know, also we're just not recording COVID deaths for the you know, in general, because there's not, like, I mean, the CDC is not posting this, is not collecting that fucking data anymore. And also, like you said, it is not. Oh, people are not dying of COVID. People are dying of COVID complications, like
Mhm.
respiratory, or cardiovascular stuff, and we're just not even attempting to record that stuff. But yes, even I would assume, even considering that stuff, COVID deaths are likely down. but that is not even what we're talking about here. And even in the NPR article, that is not the discussion that is being had. The discussion is very clearly that this person is worried about long COVID, uh, um, and long-term disabling symptoms. And that's what
Right.
everybody, that is the conversation that's being had. It is not about deaths. Deaths is a terrible part of this. But and we're just accepting that a bunch of people are going to fucking die from COVID like they just fucking die from the flu. But what's much more worrying is the way that repeated fucking COVID exposures are disabling a huge portion of our population. And that is completely unacknowledged in this whole article.
Yeah, and that's something that we really can see reflected in the data. We see these shockwaves, as Jen said in the chat, like, the number of people applying for disability has gone up. It's in the workforce. That's part of why we don't have
Why nobody wants to
people
fucking work
working.
anymore.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they fucking can't. Some of it's because they died, and some of it's because they became disabled permanently,
Yeah.
or at least long term from long COVID. And DeBoer's argument throughout this piece is that, one, COVID is over. He does basically say, like, yes, we have endured terrible losses. Yes, this was a horrible event, but functionally it's over. That's his argument.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even like you like uh said basically says that. No, he definitely explicitly
Yeah,
says COVID is,
it's over.
yeah, it is functionally over. I forget his wording, but he says something like that. And he says that the government, the global and American government's response worked, is his basic argument, which is nuts.
Mhm.
He even like,
Yeah.
even as he's like, oh well, the conservatives were all bad, but they did a good job. He's even like, even the Donald Trump American response was still like like wildly successful, which is just so not true.
Right. Yeah, he repeatedly makes the case that this was inevitable, that we are in a hyper-connected world, and that COVID is an airborne virus unlike any other, and that this playing out of the pandemic that we've seen was going to happen no matter what was done.
Right.
And he also repeatedly, in quoting Skaka's piece, says that there's nothing now that could be done. So, for example, he says, he's quoting Skaka here, people like Garib, the author of the NPR article, are helping to make returning to normal impossible, he says. And then this is Freddie again. But how? Where's the evidence? I see this suggestion all the time that the immunocompromised could be living lives of freedom and confidence if the rest of us committed to generally vague additional COVID measures. But these claims seem both insufficiently specific about what behaviors are demanded of the rest of us and insufficiently supported in terms of providing responsible scientific evidence to prove their efficacy. Uh, what? Like, this is crazy to me. Um, because then he goes on to exact in the same paragraph exact examples of he's saying that, like, COVID conscious people are vague in what they're asking for, and then
Right.
this is the next thing he says. Let's say that ordinary people would consent to masking everywhere again, to universal vaccine mandates for public spaces, and to the, he says, dubious to say the least practice of social distancing. Like, my brother, you just articulated some of the very specific things
Yeah.
that are being asked for. Masking, HVAC, you're ignoring that one here
He doesn't. He
conveniently.
doesn't. In the he actually does mention HVAC. I was surprised by that. At some point in the article, he actually does say um, that that is a thing that we should have done and we didn't do.
Mhm. Yeah, and, if you wanna criticize the messaging, yeah, we should be pushing for that more. We should be lobbying more collectively for that.
Yeah.
Sure, the government
And
also should have given a shit enough to do those things, like.
and to be pedantic, I really don't think I don't feel like social distancing is part of, from my I am not deep in the COVID conscious like online space. I am sort of like I don't feel like I'm really deep into those discussions, but I really feel like social distancing is not a big part of that conversation. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I feel like a lot of people were critical of the 6 foot social distancing as a major part of the messaging that happened during the initial, like, you know 2020 and 2021, because it didn't really work. It was part of the way that, like, we washed, everybody was washing all of their groceries and all that stuff, which at first w- made sense because we didn't know what it was, but it quickly became obvious that it was airborne, and a lot of this stuff didn't make sense. um and it does feel like, that particular thing. And then later he even talks about, um uh that people are holed up in their house with anxiety, and they're washing all their surfaces all the time, which is again a thing that people that are aware of the science are clear that doesn't help, that doesn't work, that doesn't do
Right.
anything. And it is so clearly like a just a, straw man argument to make people sound ridiculous.
It's so out of date. I haven't heard anybody use the phrase socially distancing or social distancing in ages for exactly the reasons that you just described. Like the
Yeah.
second we knew the airborne data, people were talking about, even really when social distancing was foundation, it
Sorry,
never made any
you cut
sense.
out for a second because I pressed
Okay,
something.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
People who were COVID conscious have been criticizing social distancing as a measure pretty much from the beginning because it is so nonsensical. It's like magical thinking
Yeah.
about how exposure works. If by that he means not even necessarily lockdown, but people staying home when they're sick and avoiding large high risk events. Like, yes, there are COVID conscious people who say that there shouldn't be any large in person events ever again. There have been people who have like posted pictures of me at Pride saying that I'm irresponsible for like going to Pride and shit like that. Like, and yeah, that does make me feel some type of way. But like, also, I do
Yeah.
understand that if somebody else has not been able to go to anything for years, I think them being mad about me being at Pride is the wrong place to put their attention. But whatever, like people are very traumatized and activated, and yeah, people lash out when they're traumatized and activated.
Yeah,
Like,
I think that's worth extending more extended aside, that I think that it is, like, I do think that there are people that are like that they're like, I won't pretend that there aren't woke scolds on Twitter. Like,
yeah,
um, it really, really made me mad when, during recently, during Palestinian protests, that people were yelling that, it was, disgusting that people were unmasked at protests. Which, like we said, yes, we need to be masking at protests, but to it was such, like, I'm forgetting the logical fallacy, but it's just like, it's so reductionist to be like, to call people out for organizing for Palestine, and being unmasked, as if it's this horrible thing, when actually, like you said, most protests, for Palestine, for anti-cop protests, all this stuff has been the most masked I've seen anybody, especially outside. Um,
right.
and that shit to me is like really, really upsetting. But and I do think that there are people, like you said, people fucking calling you out for going to, like an outdoor event, or like, as and weaponizing things like I do think that there are eugenicists, that some of the practices that are happening by the government and its response are eugenicist, like, but by individualizing that in the same way that, like, the government is doing, is not helpful, and is
Right.
like I mean, we were talking about our risk level, and like, yes, we should. I think all of us probably should be doing more, but it is not. It like there's only so much we can do, and we all have to kind of like decide our risk levels for ourselves. Um. Uh. And but again, the whole point is that the people that are doing that are fucking people on Twitter. Like,
Right.
even if I'm mad at them, which as mad as I get about shit like that, it's not as it's not in the same fucking universe as actual like on the one hand the stuff, the actual anti-vaxxing stuff, the actual like propaganda, like COVID conspiracy type stuff, because that gets people killed. And
Right.
also, it's nowhere near as bad as the way that the government is, and structures of power are like purposefully not like getting like not doing anything and purposefully giving more blood to the blood machine so that we can have our economy can be okay. And
Right.
to create a false equivalence of like, so even like we're saying, even though I think that he does, like, there is no part of this article in which he is like actually effectively calling out an actual like amount of people who are like going possibly going too far. Like, I think he this whole article is about that there are these people that are crazy about COVID, and all of the descriptions that he talks about here, I truly believe are not people that are people that, like, there's no part of this where he describes anything that seems that is like outside of reasonable, even a little bit. But
Yeah.
but even to give him the benefit of the doubt and acknowledge that from our perspective, I mean, that there are people that are being unreasonable about certain things, specifically in the way they are weaponizing this stuff against individuals and like protest groups and stuff like that. That not only is that not what he's talking about, but they're also, like I said, just fucking people talking on Twitter. They don't have any fucking structural power, and
Mhm.
also they're not the things that their goals are not structurally dangerous. Like, what is dangerous about those goals? Oh, that we do less shit. I mean, and we like go out less, and it's like that's not structurally dangerous. And then the point that you were
Mhm.
saying, which again is like, how the how the fuck are you going to be mad at people that feel that way? If there's someone who is a fucking immunocompromised person who or even just feels like they could be, because none of us are getting the fucking care that we need. None of us know if
Mhm.
we're fucking have long COVID or are immunosuppressed from previous COVID infections. None of us fucking know. And so if there's somebody
Mhm.
out there who has not gone out in fucking 4 years because they've been forgotten about by everyone in society, and they are on Twitter yelling about something that I think about, like, that our COVID restriction, like, that individuals should be making choices about COVID that are differently than they are. Okay, that's fucking fair, dog. Like,
Mhm.
even if they're like doing shit that is so outside of what I would agree with, they are so deeply fucking traumatized and abandoned that, like, yeah, do it. Like, I get it. Like, how can you not
Mhm.
have fucking empathy for those people? But that's not even who
Yeah.
he's fucking talking about.
Right. Right, he's just talking to people who are, like, saying, "Oh, people need to mask." Like, the
Right.
amount of, like, moving goalposts here in this piece, like,
Right.
he's saying, "COVID is over,
Right.
but even if it wasn't, it would have been inevitable. Nothing could have been done about it. But even if something could have been done about it, nobody has any specific asks. But even if they do have specific asks, nobody's gonna do those things." Like, it's just this argument for, like,
Yeah.
apathy, for, like,
Yes.
smug apathy. And we kind of already have a surplus of smug apathy from our what he would call like the political chattering class of like liberal op-ed writers. Like
Yeah.
somebody being annoying on Twitter is not the most important salient political issue. It's just not. Um, as much as I do find some of that stuff like frustrating and not the most persuasive as a public health measure,
Right.
like I've said this many times, this has come up in the conversation a lot. Like disabled people have the right to be angry. They have the right to experience grief. They shouldn't have to be tone policed in expressing that grief in the most tidy way. And part of the difficulty right now is disabled people themselves have had to become the public health apparatus. They've had to become the scientific data like monitoring apparatus. So they don't have, and it all is happening in the exact same place. So the place where disabled people are talking to each other is also the place where they're using their public health messaging. And so all of these things get the context gets collapsed and different messages get equated with each other. And so a person saying, I feel alone, I feel resentful, I don't trust my friends anymore because they're not taking COVID related measures, things that make emotional sense,
Yeah.
regardless of whether they're politically true or not. They make emotional sense. People should be able to experience that grief. That's being taken as a political message, as a public facing message, and used sometimes as one when it doesn't have that far of a reach anyway. It's just mostly reaching people who already care about them, as we already mentioned. And then they're being punished for it not being this perfectly sanitized message
Yeah.
because we don't have any other public health messaging on COVID. It's again, everything, it's this systemic shame shit. The individual who is most marginalized, most vulnerable, is shouldering all the burden of being the perfect symbol of the
Mm-hmm.
injustices that they experience and how to fix them.
Yep.
And so, of course, they can't do that. Like, they
Yeah.
can't meet that standard. Nobody
Yeah.
can. It's an unwinnable standard.
Yeah. 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 It's very frustrating on a lot of levels.
Yeah. Um, Vampires Are Creeps said, I have friends who have dropped off and self isolated socially because they are so angry at the rest of us who are conscious, careful, and do mask because they don't see us do it 100% perfectly for their standards 24/7. I'm sincerely making a good faith effort with my best judgment, with the wellness of myself and others in mind, but their fear and trauma is keeping them inside regardless of their health status. And I don't know, dude, I'm just so heartbroken about the same thing. Like, I would never ever criticize them in return because I get it, but I also miss my people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's roughly how I feel about it. Like people are really traumatized, and when people feel traumatized and left behind, then they isolate more,
Yeah.
especially in America. And so it feeds into this message of you can't trust other people, you can't form community, and that doesn't make it any better.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to institutional failure. Like
Yeah.
those people are doing the best that they can with really, really little
Yeah.
being offered to them.
It's and it feels impossible to make a because it does come down to risk management, right? And it feels impossible because the conversation is flattened and people are made to be like, well, there's no risk. Like, you know, you need to
Mm-hmm.
everybody needs to get over it because for the economy. Um and and I don't blame people for feeling like they have to isolate completely because even if they're not immunocompromised, even if they're even if they've never had COVID, it is it is fucking scary to think that you could just get COVID once and you could have really debilitating long COVID or die. I mean, it's possible.
Right.
That shit is possible, and nobody fucking cares. And
Yeah.
so it's like even if you do not have more of a reason than the average, even if you are not immunocompromised, I I I fucking get it. Why you would
Yeah.
be in that place.
Yeah. And that's probably the most infuriating thing about the DeBoer piece. There's a lot of infuriating things about it. But he goes into this whole thing about like, I'm sorry, when did so many people become immunocompromised? It
Right.
sounds like the fucking like, oh, these kids are making up their peanut allergies shit that boomers used to do. When like
Hmm.
in actuality, there's more peanut allergies now because of antibiotic over prescription.
Yeah.
There are there's there are more peanut allergies now. Like just because it seems crazy and a pain in the ass to you doesn't mean it's like
Made up.
people being complainers. And he likens it to the use of trigger warnings on campus in his piece,
Yeah.
saying that it's very bizarre for so many college students to request trigger warnings because PTSD is super rare. And what's so traumatizing about being a college student? How could so many of them have trauma triggers?
This is actually a great analogy against his argument
I know.
for a lot of reasons. Because how long I should have. I wish I had like. He goes on this tangent for a long time. It is so clearly,
Yes.
even if I agreed with his other shit, it would be so much like, who are you, fucking Glinner? Like, come on. Like, it's just, why are we talking about fucking trigger warnings? And his, like you said, the whole thing is that he's basically saying there's all these people are saying they're immunocompromised, and he like breaks the argument down in a couple different ways, and in like comparing trigger like PTSD and trigger warnings to immunocompromised people and COVID uh, safety. And basically, his big thing is like uh, PTSD used to be something that we did. We only diagnosed for combat veterans. It's like, yeah, and we were
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
And he's like, he even says somewhere in here that like it was, there's some belief that PTSD could actually be a symptom of like repeated concussive injury, and it's like, okay, sure, like
Like,
even if that's true, that doesn't mean that people that don't have combat, like don't have that kind of trauma, don't have trauma. Like, sure, it is like we used to think that this thing was more narrow, and now we have it, now it is more broad. And yes, that means that people that are diagnosed with PTSD today are not necessarily as traumatized as somebody who's been in fucking a combat situation, but so fucking
well,
what?
it completely ignores the data, the current, like, this is what's so frustrating whenever he talks about neurodiversity stuff. He doesn't know what he's fucking talking about. Like, we
Even
have
though his
known
whole
for
thing is the data, I'm the one that's the one that knows the data.
the data is very clear that it's not even the acute traumatic incident in war veterans that causes the PTSD. Lots of people who experience exposure to a really terrifying, gruesome event at wartime do not develop PTSD symptoms. What is predictive is the person's social support after they get back. Um, if you are really isolated in making the transition into being a veteran after being active duty, if you don't have an easy transition to stable housing, to living with somebody who cares about you, to family and social connections, if you don't have a social routine, if you struggle with job placement, those are the people that get PTSD. We see just as much PTSD. I mean, in a certain sense, fuck them. People who operate drones, who are remotely doing gruesome things rather than physically exposed to gruesome things, they experience PTSD at the exact same rate as people who are active combat. Their body's actually physically in danger because, and sometimes even more so, the drone operators, because they are more isolated. Which again, whatever, fuck them, like uh,
Yeah,
the unrepentant ones, like whatever. But like,
right.
tool of the imperial war machine sucks. It's evil, but
Yeah, we don't need to talk
it's
about how sad it is that all of the Israeli IDF people are coming back with with fucking PTSD and pissing their beds and shit. We don't
right. Yeah, fuck
but
them,
but total aside.
but like the data is very robust at this point. It's not the single traumatic incident that forms PTSD. It's the social integration after the trauma. And that's also why we have CPTSD,
Right.
which I'm sure he would also say is totally made up, that complex trauma isn't a thing.
Yeah.
A lot of times we can't predict what will be a traumatic incident for one person and not for another because it's a biopsychosocial thing. It's contextual. And Freddie DeBoer repeatedly acts as if mental illness diagnoses are these objective, biologically verifiable things because he experiences his bipolar as I have this brain problem, I take medication for it, and that's it. It's
Yeah.
this terrible affliction I have that I need medication for. And that model doesn't apply even to most bipolar patients, but it certainly doesn't apply to PTSD sufferers whose the nature of their suffering is inherently social contextual. So, yeah, even if you think they're a bunch of crybabies, a lot of fucking college students are traumatized. The way that we diagnose trauma is if somebody's acting fucking traumatized, and lots of people act fucking traumatized today. So something's going on, whether
I
you
don't
like it or not.
I don't think it's new. I think that society is traumatizing the way that we live our fucking lives, and that I don't think that's new. I think we're just getting better at acknowledging it and realizing how fucking bad it is. Like, it's like divorce. Like, oh well,
Mm-hmm.
divorce has gone up, and it's like, yeah, because we allowed women to do it. You know what women did before divorce existed? Their husbands mysteriously died. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, or they had a barbiturate addiction, or they got lobotomized. Like,
yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of fucking bullshit layer cake here. Um and 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 again, it's wild how good of an analogy this is, in that it is wrong. Like, in both cases it is wrong in very similar fucking ways. And so
yes,
it's like, yes, there is more people with fucking PTSD. You're wrong about the science. And also, it's like, it his he kind of goes on to, like, well, even if you're very polite and you ask how many people have actual PTSD, people get mad at you, because they say, well, it doesn't matter. It's for everybody. Um, and it's true. Like, what the fuck are we talking about here? We're talking about fucking trigger warnings. Who gives a shit? What do we ask? What are people
mm-hmm.
fucking asking for? They're asking for fucking warnings if somebody gets raped. Like, why are
Yeah,
you mad about this? Why do you care? And it's like this big social nightmare that everybody has got PTSD now, and we all need fucking trigger warnings. And it's like, who fucking cares? What are you
yeah.
talking about? he
It's an
never he never explains why it matters. He never explains.
he
And it's
points to like two university policies that he says has allowed students to sometimes skip material if it covers a topic that's triggering for them. And what that neglects is 99% of all universities in this country and worldwide have no formal trigger warning policy. Faculty, I've reported on this since the beginning of this shit being an issue in like 2018 and shit, like, or 2016 and shit. Um, Most universities, 99% of universities, do not require faculty to use trigger warnings. Anybody, functionally speaking, who uses trigger warnings has opted in to do it because they've decided it's a nice thing to do. Or maybe a student asked and they said, that sounds reasonable. I can do that.
yeah,
So nobody's being forced to do this. Nobody's being censored. And even when people are using trigger warnings as an opt in policy, in all but two cases, in all but two universities in the world that he can mention in this piece, it is literally just an advisory that, hey, this reading has a sexual assault scene in it. Hey, this medical documentary has blood in it. Just so you know, it's not an option to waive the assignment. It's not students using it to get out of having to learn about slavery or whatever the fuck. Like,
right.
that's not what it is. Like, he loves to talk a big game about following the data, but when the data shows that the thing he's worried about isn't a problem,
Yeah.
it's just some made up Twitter fight, all of a sudden then he isn't looking at the data.
Yep. Yeah. It's so angering, also just so laughable and ridiculous. Ah.
It's like, bro, why is this your priority right now if you're a Marxist? What is the
Yeah! Who fucking cares, man, about like people being mad? Like the fact that even if you agree with what he's saying, the fact that it fucking you would think it fucking matters that people are mad on Twitter about fucking masking. Like
Mhm. Yeah.
we're all gonna fucking die from climate collapse. Like, what are you doing? We gotta overthrow capitalism, or else we're gonna die, and you're worried about people on Twitter. What the fuck
Yeah.
are we doing here?
Well, I'll tell you what, he has, let's see, 199 comments on this piece, 7 restacks, and 200 hearts, which are decent Substack numbers. Uh, this stuff pulls in numbers. Like,
Yeah.
he has readers who love to hear about, yo, the left is being so irrational, and as a principled leftist, I wish we would get our shit together. And then he gets surprised, like, on a regular basis, he'll publish articles that are like, why are so many of you transphobic in my comments? I'm not transphobic. I
You're a
just want to
stupid
emphasize once
piece of
again,
shit.
like, he really, like, he's very, like, anti-nation state. He's been very, like, pro-Palestine, and he'll be like, why are so many of my readers pro-Israel? I've never said anything pro-Israel. What's wrong with you guys? And it's like, my brother, because the other 95% of the time, you're posting about why leftists are stupid. That's your audience, bitch. Like,
Yeah.
like if you were accurately, orienting your Marxist priorities, I think, hey, a huge segment of the population is disabled now. How are we going to care for that institutionally? Seems like maybe a more important thing to write about than some people are staying at home more than others.
I'm sad I can't go to a restaurant because
Yeah.
my husband could die and it's his
Yeah.
fault.
Yeah.
I didn't see that tweet. God, that fucking tweet. I'm the problem. I'm gonna think about that for the rest of my life. I'm gonna die. It's gonna kill me.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's yeah, I mean, maybe it's like somehow, despite it all, him and his wife have like a relationship where they can joke about things, and he. But what the fuck? Like, it just seems like very self-hating to be subjected to all of this. Like,
Yeah,
it seems
on
like
his
he's in.
birthday. On his birthday.
Yeah, it's it sucks. Um, the Argyle said in the chat, I guess I think of trigger warnings as like any other disability accommodation, in that it's designed for a specific group but beneficial to so many more.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Sidewalk
perfect.
yep. Curb cuts are the greatest example of that. But so is there's a really great 99% visible article about that, or podcast about that. Curb cuts are like the example of that, but then also so much more shit like you know um, alt text on images, or just the fact that we have like screen like we have shit that like like Siri and okay Google is like that shit all comes uh from technology that was for disabled people, and it's like yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, making things more broadly accessible helps a lot of people, but especially the people who the nature of how they're excluded in society is not easily documented.
Yeah.
And that's long COVID sufferers. That's most people with complex trauma. All of these people who can't, certifiably prove to Freddie DeBoer's standards that they need help. Like, there's a lot of ways that people are excluded that are hard to prove.
uh,
And that's part of how institutions exclude them, is by demanding really hard, iron tight, documented proof.
God, his fucking tag on here is cool but rude.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fucking put you in the hammer car, exploding hammer car.
Yes.
uh, um okay, I need to go because I need to go to my COVID super spreader event.
Hell yes.
uh,
Piss on the cat litter at the Dorian concert.
I'm very yes. I'm really hopeful that Dorian asks for mask usage. But anyway, it'll be fun. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Um, um, yeah. Thank you for the great the especially great chat's always great, but especially lots of great
Hmm.
stuff. Um, I feel like there were some articles, there was some people, some stuff in here that we missed. I'd love if you throw that in the Discord stream discussion channel. Love to look at that. Um, but yeah, let's see if there's a raid.
Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of good stuff. Yeah. Let's see who's streaming. Mm, 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 mm. Nobody's jumping out at me on my list, especially. So if there's anybody you are
Yeah.
into.
Do um do Ampuko. Very cool.
Okay.
I don't know what they're doing, but they do very cool uh weird OBS stuff a lot of
Oh yeah, I just looked at their stream and it's like C3PO over. It just turned into like Pinkie Pie. I don't know what the fuck's happening over there. So
All right.
it'd be trippy. And they're playing Mirror Drop.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Liv. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, great work in the chat, everybody. This was a really nice conversation, and I think very helpful.
A hard one, but a really good
Certainly.
one. So it's
Hmm.
great when we can hit that. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Catch you on the flip.